Well, happy Tuesday, August the 8th to you here at 710 KNUS. It's Geoff Brauchler with the George. So also, happy birthday to the dollar. In 1786, the United States Congress unanimously, when's the last time you heard that out of Congress? Unanimously chose the dollar as the monetary unit for the United States of America. Happy birthday, dollars. I wish I had more of you in my pocket. And I imagine that's going to be something that Billy and I talk about here in the very near future as we head into Tuesday's show. Listen, the weather, I want to tell you once again, and we shelved this for some months now. Originally, we were going to launch our own 710 KNUS investigation into the fraud that seems to be meteorology. But here's further proof that something is missed. Do you remember yesterday I emphasized the fact that our little pictogram from our friends at Denver 7 had only one day on the entire week of a cloud with lightning bolts coming out of it, and that was yesterday. And true to form, it rained a little bit yesterday. Graham and I cut out of work a little bit early. He's only got today left before school starts, and we hit the neighborhood pool. And yet there were some clouds, a little bit of rain. Well, guess what? This pictogram that Billy has printed off for me has lightning bolts today, too. And wait, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, more lightning bolts. That's just 24 hours ago. We had just no more lightning bolts, and now a bunch of lightning bolts. Now, listen, I know lightning bolts aren't science or math or meteorology, but what's up with these people and this nonsense? Meanwhile, storms are killing people up there in the east. I think they had 2 deaths already. I mean, I know. It's Billy's fossil fuel-driven German automobiles. I get it. I blame him every day as well. But I am struggling here to see how, once again, we have lightning bolts coming out of the clouds on Tuesday evening here. A few p.m. storms, high of 83, tomorrow 88, 93, then 90 on Friday, 92 lightning bolts Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I don't get it, but I don't know what's happening here. I don't think we can trust the weather people anymore. A lot of things, by the way, have gone on in the news, but something that Billy and I started talking about as we were getting ready for the show here. By getting ready for the show, I want to tell you that I think some of what makes this show accessible, if that's the right word for the kids these days, is that we don't really hide anything from you. If Billy shows up pantless, we tell you Billy showed up pantless. If it's going to be a secret. Well, not today. I mean, it didn't happen today, but
Okay. We're getting into something there.
Yeah, and so because tomorrow is the first day of school, I'm going to take off the first 2 hours of the show, and I think Sweet Pete's going to be in here to cover for me so that I can take Grammy to school. I'd take Jeff too, honestly, but Jeff is in Korea. More to talk about with that too. In fact, I had reached out to that cat to see if he would come on the radio this morning to talk about, if you haven't been following us in the news, man, the Jamboree is coming apart at the seams. Maybe I can get him to call in here.
Because of weather.
Because of weather. In fact, Billy, I'm texting him right now as we talk. If he calls in,
that would be great.
We'll give it a shot here and see how it is. But yeah, the weather people, thank God they're not relying on the Denver 7 weather people. Maybe that's what happened in the planning. But so I had originally sent out an email because I thought today was the first day of school, and that's true. But for 6th graders and freshmen at high school, not for 8th graders and sophomores and beyond. So I had amended that email, apparently failed to tell William about it. And so when I walked in, Billy had that, what in the hell are you doing here?
Yeah.
I'm like, I work here?
Yeah.
Do I still work here? Like, did you get a text in the middle of the night? Don't let George in the building?
That was funny. Yeah, I had a conversation with Kelly yesterday about, finding someone for you this morning. And he had called me last night, and I didn't see the phone call, and I didn't see it this morning, so I had no idea. So Lou shows up, and I'm like, yeah, we probably have someone different in the first 2 hours, but I don't know who it is.
Yeah, and it turns out here's the difference.
Yeah, and then you walk in.
I showered. That's the difference. I showered this morning, so it's hygienic, George.
Yeah, which is nice.
Yeah, and so, this is it right here. We're getting the call. We're getting a phone call from South Korea right now. If you'll grant me this personal privilege of being over the show. This is real news. I mean, this has really happened here. I'm going to bring up our on-the-scene reporter. His name is Geoff. Geoff, good morning. Or for you, good evening.
Hi, Dad.
Hey, buddy. It's 13 hours ahead, so for you, it's getting ready to be nighttime, right?
Actually, 15. It's already nighttime.
Is it 15 hours? Well, whatever. Math. Yeah. You're better at it than I am. First off, how are you doing? I love you.
I'm doing really well.
Okay, now, what's it like at the Jamboree today?
Well, okay, so we're not at the Jamboree anymore.
What happened?
I know, crazy, right? So, a couple things have happened to, like, make basically everyone not be able to go to the Jamboree, but the biggest one is a typhoon off the, like, southern coast of Korea that's heading north.
Now, this is huge news, and people here probably aren't following the Boy Scout Jamboree, but when I say this is international news, that's no joke, because when you joined us last week as you headed in there, there are people from 8 jillion countries that are there. There are 50,000 scouts there, and now it's like this mass evacuation. It's like Scout Dunkirk. Do you know what I mean? Like they're trying to get everybody off the peninsula. What's going on?
Well, we're not trying to get everyone off the peninsula. It's more so moving them out of the Jamboree site, because it seems like it would be really bad to be out in the open while it's dumping like 3.6 inches of rain.
And so had the weather been bad up until today? Did you get any bad weather yet, or are you still just bracing for impact?
We're still kind of bracing for impact, but it's actually been really nice here for the past couple of days.
Now, you say here you are no longer at, what was the town you told us you were at for the Jambo?
Like Saman Gum. That's where the Jamboree was.
That's my favorite kind of gum. And where are you now?
I'm at Camp Humphreys, the military base in South Korea.
And how luxurious is it there?
It's actually really nice. I mean, we're all kind of in a gym together, but everything's worked out.
That's how you know you got a scout and the son of an army guy. He's living in a middle school gym, and he goes, "Hey, pretty nice."
It's all right.
Holy smokes, man! So tell me about your days then, and you guys have been living in the gym for how many days?
It's I think probably fourth night tonight.
Mm-hmm. Fourth night? Oh, buddy, do you feel like you're missing out on the Jambo experience?
No, because everyone left.
Well, you know what I mean. You know what I'm saying, Geoff. I mean, had everything gone the way it was supposed to, what were the events you were going to miss?
Yeah, if everything was going the way it was supposed to, I'd be really disappointed that I can't do a lot of the things that the World Jamborees are known for a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. But meeting other countries and doing all the events and things together, I never got to go paragliding, which was one of the activities that I wanted to do.
Oh, buddy, I didn't know you were going to do that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
A couple fun facts though. Camp Humphreys, largest U.S. military base overseas for us, right there in South Korea. Also, that Desiderio Army Airfield, busiest Army airfield in all of Asia. So congratulations. What did you guys get to do so far that's sort of to try to make up for the lost events like the gliding and stuff?
So yesterday we got to go to the a mall, a really big mall in Seoul near the World Trade Center here. That was really fun. We got to go and shop around, and the British were also there too, so we got to meet up with them.
Now the Brits, where are they staying? This was a sore spot for you.
Hotel.
What kind of hotel?
Very expensive hotels.
Son of a, you leave it to the Brits. You know why? Because we're footing the bill for NATO. I'm just going to say it right here. If they were paying more of their fair share for their defense, I'm kidding. They're probably the ones paying more than almost everybody else. It's the Germans that are hosing us. Nonetheless, so they're staying in a hotel. You run into these guys. Is there a merit badge for shopping?
No, unfortunately not. I mean, there is personal management, but that's more like financial planning.
And the mall, is it very different at all than the American malls?
Yeah, it's a lot more like compact and tight. It doesn't have like kind of large like hallways and things.
Really?
It's like a lot more windy.
Windy. That's a good description. And did you buy anything there?
Yeah, I bought a Lego set and a keychain.
Which of those is for me?
The keychain, if you want it. It's a
Yeah,
Lego brick.
I just sprung that on you. I'm pretty sure you were like, none of these, Dad. None of these things are for you. What's the Lego set? Go on, tell us.
I got a brick head set, so it's like these little like figurines that you can build out of Lego. But I got it of Wall-E and Eve from the Pixar movie Wall-E.
Oh yeah, that's really cool. I'm hopeful that you're thinking too of getting something for your mom and your sister and your two other brothers that are trapped here in Colorado.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I'll look around.
Are you guys going to get to go see a baseball game?
That is something that they've been talking about doing a lot. They're working on it. It might not happen, but that's like because there's a lot of things that are going on around here. But what they're going to do is they're like looking to see if we can do that tomorrow night or the night after. But I think that would be a really fun thing.
How about the K-pop event?
So that was supposed to happen, I think, this Sunday, but it got postponed because everyone like had to kind of leave. And there was like a lot of issues going on.
I can't remember.
So I don't think the K-pop thing is going to happen,
So sorry,
which is
buddy.
disappointing. Yeah.
The way you described it was brilliant when I talked to you the other day, and that was, it's not the kind of thing I would ever look up and watch online. You know, but if it was going to happen live in front of me, oh yeah, I'd want to go. I'd want to go to the K-pop event. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's an awesome description. Couple things I don't know if I told you about, but this is newsworthy. I got to be on some parent, I don't know, Zoom call or something like that, where I couldn't comment for obvious reasons, but I could listen in, and man, some of the statistics they gave that caused them to pull off of the Jambo place was crazy. Some of the information was nuts. So for instance, they expected, I tell you this, 500 scouts a day to be, this is like 1%, I guess, out of 50,000. They expected 500 scouts per day to have to go into their little medical tents and facilities and use whatever that is over the course, on average, for a day. By like day 2, they were up to 5,000 a day scouts. That's 10% of all attendees cycling through the medical. I mean, holy smokes. They talked about the drainage that was anticipated was completely insufficient. And you said that doesn't surprise you because what that site where the Jamboree was set up is what? What's it going to be?
It's supposed to be like become rice fields after the end.
A rice field.
Like,
so it's perfectly suited for a rice field, not perfectly suited for a scout field.
Yeah, I mean, it's perfectly suited for rice fields because it's designed to flood, which is also a reason why the typhoon hit so hard.
Has the typhoon hit there yet?
No, I said hits with an S.
Yeah. Thank you for correcting your old man. The other thing that you had said too was that initially the weather reports that you guys were getting was that, yeah, there's some stuff off the coast, but it's going to turn left and go a different direction. And then apparently it decided, nah, Jambo.
Yeah, it apparently tacked to just go straight into Korea for no reason really other than that weather is extremely unpredictable. So it's kind of just the best we can do is kind of reorganize and regroup and do things like that.
We're talking with a Boy Scout named Jeff. He's a Star Scout. Well, he will be a Star Scout when he gets back. He's our on-ground reporter there from South Korea for a jamboree that is oddly reminiscent of what took place in 1971 in Japan. Another typhoon hit. I should tell you, Jeff, that one of the things that these parents, I mean, the scout people they're so good, and they've been planning this thing for no joke 2 years. And it feels like the South Korean host committee failed us. That's what it feels like. But these parents that are helping, these volunteers that are trying to keep this thing going, they're like, well, you know what? This is going to leave great memories for them. And they're always going to remember this, and they're always going to get to talk about this. And I thought, man, talk about putting lipstick on a pig. You know what I mean? Like, to be able to say, yeah, I went to Jamboree, typhoon hit. It fell apart halfway through it. I mean, I guess that's the memory that you want to build. I hope they come up with a special merit badge so that for the rest of your life, you can say only a handful of scouts ever got the South Korea Typhoon 2023 badge. Any talk of that?
I mean, it probably wouldn't be a merit badge, because those are things that are like, you earn them by doing paperwork and like requirements and stuff.
Paperwork gets you
there's like there's only a select amount of merit badges that kind of exist, but I'd say like activity patches or something could happen. Like, I already know that every scout only gets one like round exclusive 25th World Jamboree badge.
Yeah.
So that's probably going to be a bit of a hot commodity. And if something like a Typhoon World Jamboree patch does get made, it would probably be equally as rare as the 25th one.
Jeff, I'm going to convert you for a moment to someone to interview about two other topics that we'll be covering throughout the show too. One, you're 15. You're going to be 16 here by the end of the month. Thank God, because you'll be able to drive now that Trey's going up to college. That's huge, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on, one, getting a job while you're still in high school? And two, what's your sense of your ability to live out the American dream? Is that too heady? Is that too big?
Possibly. I mean, I don't know. Getting a job in high school seems like it might be kind of fun. Except, I don't know. There's obviously some weird things
what does that mean?
Come with like getting a job. I don't know. Like, most high schoolers get a job in like retail or something.
Yeah.
Working at like Raising Cane's. I don't know, but there's like a lot of weird people you have to deal with.
Are they
like
called customers or coworkers?
No, both.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Getting exposed to folks that aren't just like you.
Yeah, but sometimes it could be a bit annoying, especially if you're trying to like run a business as an employee. Yeah.
What do you think about the idea that, and I'm just throwing this out there because this is how your dad was brought up by grandpa. The car that I got was conditioned upon me paying half of everything, and I had to get a job to do it.
What do you mean by that?
Like, I had to pay for half the little teeny tiny Datsun truck, if anyone ever remembers the word Datsun, and had to pay for the gas and all that other stuff, half the gas. So it was not like grandpa was like, here you go, enjoy it. Let me know how I can get you from point A to point B on my dollar. It wasn't like that. It was, you're going to need to pay for 50% of this. How are you going to do it? So that's why I ended up getting that job at Wendy's at the then brand new food court at Villa Italian Mall, which doesn't even exist anymore. What do you think about that idea?
Mm-hmm.
What if mom and dad said, hey, son, you need to get a job to help pay for the car and all that other stuff? How does that strike you?
I mean, it seems kind of a bit far-fetched nowadays because a dollar used to go a lot farther than it does now.
But here we go. We're getting into the topic.
If you expected me to pay for half of my gas and all my half of all my car's maintenance things and like everything that comes with that, like all half, I don't think I could do that.
Yeah. Because of the dollar, because of the cost and stuff. Does that cause you to wonder whether or not you're going to be able to make it in the world after we kick you out of the nest?
Possibly.
Yeah, I know it's probably too big for the economic stuff. Something else. There's a court case that happened here in Colorado. You don't need to know the details of it, but it had to do with 18 to 20-year-olds being able to purchase firearms for self-defense. First off, in the Scouts, what firearm familiarity stuff have you gone through already?
Well, I haven't personally done anything, but there's multiple merit badges, especially rifle shooting and shotgun shooting.
Yeah. Are you going to do that?
That teach like gun safety and stuff. Possibly, but that's really only something that you would like ever do at a summer camp or something, because it's not really so often you go somewhere to shoot shotguns, and then you're like, oh, I have a merit badge that I can do.
How about this? I think I have so far failed you and Graham, because you remember I took Trey and Amanda to Centennial Gun Club some years ago. Remember that, to take them to a course on learning safety and firearm familiarity, and they got to shoot and all that. Do you remember that?
I do.
And have you got, I haven't taken you guys yet to do that, have I?
You haven't.
No. Do you want to go?
Possibly.
When you say possibly, it's like a non-committal answer. How about a yes or a no?
I mean, probably.
Oh, geez, buddy, there you go with the qualification. You sound like a politician testifying before Congress.
I mean, you are one. I learned from the best.
I should stop putting you on the radio because you kids just say things. I can't pull it back. I could have Billy edit this out of the podcast, by the way. Well, I'm going to do that when you get back. Listen, I'm so excited. Trey and I are so excited to go pick you up in the middle of the night when you guys land back here on Saturday night. I can't wait to do that. And I think we're trying to gin up the ability to go see that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty excited.
That'd be awesome.
Do you miss home?
Yeah, a bit, but I'm enjoying the time I have out here.
Let me read you a text. Well, he sounds very mature, George, but he's only 15. 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds get jobs other people and grown-ups usually don't take. So food court or maybe tutoring young people in math or science. If he's good at that, I would stay away from food delivery and things like that. That's not safe. But he should pay half if he wants a car. He needs to work for it. It's not a right. It's a privilege. Thoughts, Geoff?
Well, okay. So we live like 30 or 15 minutes away from school.
Yeah.
And in order to really get there, I kind of do need a car. It would be really evil.
Not evil. It's not evil. Don't say evil. Here's where you're right. I just realized that. I was able to take the bus. We had pretty robust busing in South Jeffco when I was going to Carmody, even though I walked, and Bear Creek High School. So you're right. We don't really have that where we live. We don't have the luxury of the busing. So I agree. And frankly, buddy, your ability to drive really amplifies our ability to work. And so there's that vicious cycle of trying to come up with that. So maybe that's true. We'll have to come up with some other good thing. I don't know if it's chores or something like that. Always good to hear from your kids is another text. Here's some other nice pictograms of some weather going crazy, blowing over the thing. And then people wanting to talk about cars. Geoff, I think that's it. I wanted that update. Are you leaving at all? Have they ever discussed you guys coming home early? Because we'd love that as well.
They haven't, because it seems like it would be a logistical nightmare to try and reorganize flights for 700 to 800 people.
Well, how about just you?
Short notice.
How wouldn't we just do it for you?
I mean, I don't think that would be nice of me to leave everybody behind, like while we're all kind of going through this together.
You're going to be a good soldier, son. I'm telling you, never leave your friends behind. That's a good one. I like it. Hey, son, I love you. Let's stay in touch. You get some sleep and let me know how things go tomorrow. Okay. Oh, did you go to the water park today?
Yes.
And how was it?
It was very fun.
Better than American water parks?
I wouldn't say so. They didn't have enough slides for it to be better.
Oh, okay, great. And then what was the thing you did before that in the morning? Some cultural event. Did you learn anything?
We went to like a folk village kind of walk around thing. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. And were there people like acting out, like if you go to Jamestown or something like that, acting out the village?
No.
Okay. All right, buddy. Well, listen, I love you and thank you for coming on. Maybe if something else crazy happens, you keep texting and calling when I'm off the air and maybe we'll have you back on. Okay. You've done a great job. If I had some 710 bling to get you, I would do it because you've earned it as our on-ground reporter.
Cool.
All right, Geoff, I love you. I'll talk with you soon.
Me too. Bye.
Right. Hey, that was a Boy Scout or a scout named Geoff. He is stuck over there in South Korea. Big international news. You can Google it. The Jamboree, which only happens every 4 years, completely upended by weather. And so there are scouts from across the planet now across, I guess, the southern peninsula there of Asia through Korea, scrambling to try to get out of this typhoon's path. I don't know what the typhoon's name is, but Geoff on the military base, which makes me feel a little bit better, at Camp Humphreys out there. He'll be stuck in a high school or a middle school gym. My favorite part was where he's like, yeah, it's pretty nice. He's on a cot in a middle school gym. I don't know. Anyway, listen, we'll cut away for a break. We'll come back. We'll do the good stuff. That's the Thorpe Report. Is that true, Billy? Are we doing the Thorpe Report? Even though I screwed you with my surprise appearance this morning. And do you choose the news ? And I'm getting head nods from Billy as he continues to furiously type away and move things around with technology. It's my fault, folks, right here. As always, it's George Brauchler on The George Show at 710 KNUS. Come sail away with me right here on 710 KNUS. It's George Brauchler on the George Show. It's that time of the show. I think we've given Billy even a minute or two more than we normally do, which is cray. My thanks to Jeff, the scout from In Country, who's updated us on the debacle right there in South Korea. But let's get local. Let's go live. Let's go with the voice of all things newsworthy. His name is Billy Thorpe. William?
Hey, I don't know if I can live up to that billing. That was cool to talk to Jeff, though. That was really
thank
neat.
you
That was a good conversation. Well, as George talked about today, we've got afternoon thunderstorms are possible today. Sunny tomorrow, hot and dry on Thursday, and the storms return for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. At least that's what the weather hippies say right now. 85 is going to be our high today, 84 tomorrow, and then 90s by late in the week. A federal judge has granted a preliminary injunction blocking a law that would raise the firearm purchase age in Colorado from going into effect. It's Senate Bill 23-169 raised the age for purchasing any firearm in Colorado from 18 to 21, was supposed to become law yesterday. The complaint was filed Monday in federal court by Rocky Mountain gun owners and 2 Colorado residents. The plaintiffs claim the law is unconstitutional. U.S. District Court Judge Philip Brimmer agreed and granted the injunction. The U.S. Marshals and the FBI are looking for a man who escaped from the Bent County Jail along with 3 other people last month. 46-year-old Mark Fox escaped from the southeastern Colorado jail late in July. Marshall said he's wanted on charges of escape, conspiracy to commit crop insurance fraud, making false statements to obstruct a federal criminal investigation, extortion by use of mail, attempting to influence a grand jury's witness testimony, and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. Marshals say Fox escaped from the Los Animas jail with 3 other men. 2 of them were caught and taken back into custody beginning of August. The other was found dead of a suspected drug overdose in Pueblo County. So they're still looking for him, though. Denver Public Schools has placed McAuliffe International School interim principal Micah Claver on paid administrative leave amid an investigation into the use of a seclusion room at the school. Last Thursday, several TPS officials held a news conference in which they revealed the district was investigating the use of what they called an incarceration room inside McAuliffe during last school year. Yeah.
Didn't you ever get sent to like timeout or something at school, or they made you go sit in an office? I don't remember a seclusion room, but
I never got a seclusion room, but I had to be, I was sent out of class.
Or go sit in the principal's office and all that stuff where there were other people. But I got to see pictures of this, man. I got to see is this like there's an Iron Maiden in the corner, maybe some chains on the wall.
And what is the talk that we've heard so far is that it is a room they would put the kids in, and then it would lock from the outside.
Oh my God.
Would not have the ability to get out. Now, the question I've got is, were they put in there alone, or were they put in there with a teacher at the time? Because I think the protocol is that there needs to be adult supervision, that you just don't leave them alone inside of a room. But because I do have friends and family in the educational world,
sure you do.
It is not unusual for a kid to lose their freaking mind and start throwing things and breaking things.
Trapped in a room?
No,
Holy
just,
smokes.
Just in general when being disciplined.
Oh, really?
Not unusual. Not unusual. There was a story from a friend of mine just at the end of last season where the kids started picking up things, throwing things, trying to break windows, tore blinds down off of the windows.
Like there's something else going on there, man. That's not normal.
Yeah, again, that's so, the idea of, oh my God, they've got a seclusion room. Okay, but I'm sorry, some of your kids are monsters. I'm not saying this is okay.
This has been a mantra of yours for years.
Some of your kids are monsters, and we need to deal with that. So, oh well. Elsewhere, a new round of laws took effect yesterday that aim to make housing more attainable for renters here in our state. One of those laws caps minimum income requirements for renters and limits the amount that landlords can charge for a security deposit. New law also caps the amount a landlord can charge for 2-month security deposit to only 2 months worth of rent is where it's going to cap that at. Also, a Colorado law that explicitly bans cities from limiting population growth or the number of residential units that's going to take effect today. But in the 11th hour, Lakewood City Council voted 8-3 to amend their growth ordinance in order to comply with the state law. The ordinance limits the city's growth for the next 2 years. After that, the restrictions will be permanently lifted. Lakewood voters approved the growth restrictions during a special election in July of 2019. Yeah, and a man who pleaded guilty to killing his sister, her boyfriend, and a family dog near Franktown last year got 97 years in prison in a Douglas County District Court yesterday. 31-year-old Casey Duvall got 48 years each for the murders of Jessica Mitchell, 32, her boyfriend Todd Gray, 34. The judge also sentenced him to 1 year in prison on account of animal cruelty. At least he got something for the dog, just saying.
Yeah, by the way, fake, as everybody knows, if you're doing the math in your head, you know that you can cut that 96 in half to 48, take off all the time he was in custody waiting trial, which is that makes sense. That's justified to me. And this guy is likely to be parole eligible somewhere around the 42 to 46% mark for his sentence, which I know it's still, you're like, but George, that's like 4 decades. I get it. I just don't want a dude like this to be able to sniff freedom again. And that's what the sentence meant. And now there's a chance this dude may wheelchair his way out of the prison.
Yeah, that's a good point, because if they did cut it in half, etc., dude could be late 50s, early 60s, you know, on the really, really low end of that. And that's, So also, Colorado's largest airport is looking to fill more than 500 open jobs. DIA is holding an in-person job fair from 10:30 to 12:30 tomorrow. Okay. I'm looking at this. They have 500 open jobs, and it's a 2-hour job fair. Really? How hard are you looking? Okay. Job fair is going to take place in the Plaza and DIA's Westin Hotel in the Jepson Terminal, co-hosted by Denver Workforce Development. The fair will feature employers from across the airport, including airlines, concessions, rental car companies, and the city and county of Denver. Full-time, part-time, hourly positions, salaried positions, all available, but only for those 2 hours. Just 2 hours. That's all you can manage. You got to fill 500 positions. So important. But a job fair is 2
I
hours.
sure hope that some of them are either
great.
customer service related or baggage claim related.
Oh, no, that's not going to happen.
That's not it, huh?
Not at all. They're also not in security, especially not walking the parking lots to prevent your car from being
Hold on,
stolen.
dude. There was an article I just read about security, man, where a person found a boarding pass in the trash.
I saw that.
Did you see that?
Yes.
And the clear people escorted them through security.
Yeah.
And they made it all the way to like the gate in the plane.
Yeah.
What?
It's like how did they not figure out it wasn't their pass? That just
what is clear describing? I mean, your unadulterated path through all the protective measures.
We don't get to check anything. You are clear.
And it happened more than once.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean,
ridiculous.
at some point, maybe we ought to eyeball the clear people and say, you're not TSA.
Yeah.
Even though, listen, TSA isn't great either. My favorite / scariest parts of the year when they come out with those annual reports, where they're like, here's all the things that made it through security. And you're like, oh my God, one of those is a saw.
Yeah, exactly.
Or something like that.
Where were they carrying this? Well, that's all I've got. Yeah.
That's not all you've got, but that's plenty for right now,
true.
Friend. Thank you for that. We've had texts coming in too. One is, we had to lock our daughter in her room from the outside when she was 3 to 4-ish until she worked through her tantrums. It worked, and she's an awesome adult now. Another, our buddy Alexa, a mom has debunked the racist isolation room BS in a letter. Her white kid uses the room to help him call down and reset. As usual, Tay lies. Someone said Carmody had a detention room. I didn't know that, and I went to Carmody. Man, I was there for 7th and 8th grade, which at the time was the only years you could go there. I don't know if they've gone full on middle school or not, but I don't remember there being a detention room. Maybe I was a better kid than I thought. Anyway, listen, we're going to cut away for a break. Come back. We're going to do the fun stuff. It's called the You Choose the News. So buckle up, sit tight. We'll be back in just a moment. George Brauchler on the George Show, 710 KNUS.
Imagine the lifelong impact of a journey to the Holy Land, surrounded by like-minded travelers. Picture yourself stepping foot in iconic locations right out of history. With nationally syndicated radio hosts Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher, you'll gain firsthand understanding of the spiritual and political importance of this vital region.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher here. I hope you'll join Dennis Prager and me on an amazing journey through Israel in October 2023.
Discover Israel's vibrant culture and why this nation is such a strategic partner for the United States. Join Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher on this life-enriching Israel tour, October 25th through November 3rd, 2023. For more information, call 855-565-5519 or visit standwithisraeltour.com.
George Brauchler back with you here, 710 KNUS. Plenty of time to do this. I just want to say the feedback we've received from folks, from a whole bunch of different sources, and you can text us at 710 KNUS and the app, is that the kids these days need a room, like what do we call it? The seclusion room. Like more and more, the feedback we're getting is kids these days be bad. And there are a lot of kids out there. Now, I can't imagine Geoff or any of the kids sniffing that, but the stories you've told, Billy, some other things that I've heard, some people texting in, mother of God. I mean, what is going on?
I'm telling you, some of your kids are monsters.
Like some of the schools are turning into like gladiator schools.
Well, you've heard what's happening in Texas, haven't you?
Well, that's so broad. I mean,
no,
yes and no.
Yeah, that's true. I believe it's, I want to say it's a Houston, part of the Houston school district. The school district is closing a majority of the libraries in the schools because they're now becoming disciplinary rooms.
What?
Yeah, that they have enough kids that they have to remove from class and instruct them in other ways and keep them away from what you would call, I don't know.
Go sit by Chaucer and think about what you've done.
The general population, no, the books and everything are going away because you can't give those kids that kind of thing to act out.
Something to eat.
Yeah, well, so the idea is, the libraries are being stripped out and they're becoming disciplinary rooms.
Houston, by the way,
that's going to be
it's the 4th ESC area. It is the largest school district in Texas and one of the largest in America.
Yeah, and I think it's Houston. I could be wrong, but it's one of the districts.
Let's blame it on Houston.
Yeah.
I mean, they were
Why
the murder
not?
capital of the Western world for years.
And they're not listening, so who knows?
Yeah, here's another quick text. We used timeout on the stairs or in the corner. Yeah, I get that. Listen, every kid needs a little bit of time away. I heard her say.
So does every
parent. From each other. That was Chicago right there, folks. Listen, I'm going to turn it over to Billy. He is the MC of the best part of the show, the best produced part of the show, the part that you look forward to every single morning if you're in the 6 o'clock hour. That's called You Choose the News, William.
The secret is it's the only produced part of the show. Shh. I know. Sorry. Oh, yes. I gave away the secret. It is time for us to play You Choose the News, everybody's favorite fake radio news game show, where we have scoured the interwebs for stupid stories and given them dumb headlines to play this fake radio news game because no one in power really knows we're doing it. So we appreciate you playing along.
I love that nobody gets up before 7 that works
fantastic.
Here.
No one knows. All righty, sir. Here's your choices this morning. Maybe Senior Fight Club is a bad idea. It's your fault I'm doing drugs and drinking. Spa offers bonus treatment. And every man's best friend. Once again, your choices are maybe Senior Fight Club is a bad idea. It's your fault I'm doing drugs and drinking. Spa offers bonus treatment and every man's best friend. Your choice.
It sounds like the basis for most of the legislation we've seen in this area over recent years. It's your fault that I'm doing drugs and drinking.
Yes, it is your fault I'm doing drugs and drinking. At least that is the claim of a dock worker in Ireland who has been fired. He said it's actually his employer's fault that he's been doing a lot of cocaine and drinking quite a lot. Michael Martin showed up to work and was a little high on the job. They have random drug tests. How high was he? Let's go to the big board. 29 times over the legal limit.
Of what? Of
Cocaine.
alcohol?
Cocaine.
Oh, wait a minute. There's a legal limit of cocaine?
I was surprised as well.
I thought that maybe it would just be you have cocaine.
Yes, I thought so too. I was super surprised there was a legal limit of how much cocaine you were allowed to have in your body in Ireland. Yes, exactly. So basically, he was 29 times over the legal limit, and he is claiming an unfair dismissal under an act that was moved through the legislature there in 1977. He said that he had a whole bunch of stress in his life, one of which he actually accidentally killed a coworker about a year and a half ago.
What?
Yeah, he killed a truck driver, and it put him on a bad road of drinking and doing coke, he says, and my employer gave me no help.
Dang it, employer, come on.
So he is saying he should not have been fired for showing up to work with 29 times the amount of legal cocaine in his body. It is the employer's fault, and he thinks they should be forced to either hire him back or give him a giant pile of money so he can go and spend it on more liquor and more cocaine. In fact, how much is it? Okay, now, now 8 NGs per milliliter is what the fail rate is. He came in at 234.
Oh, man. It's like he did a line of coke and then went right to the urinalysis. Like, hang on, give me a couple minutes here to metabolize this, and then I'm all yours.
Exactly.
Maybe he just spilled cocaine into his urine sample.
Whatever it is. I have no idea, but the idea is 29 times, and he's like, no, I was depressed after this happened. He said, me head is so effed up. This job has a duty here to care for me. That's what he told them.
You've sent that exact text.
That
is such a crazy thing.
Normally it's like, 2 a.m.
That's weird.
All righty. Now, next choice, sir. Maybe Senior Fight Club is a bad idea. Spa offers bonus treatment or every man's best friend.
Fight Club, baby.
Fight Club. Maybe Senior Fight Club is a bad idea. We are going to the wonderful state of Florida. Imagine that. A road rage confrontation at a Florida country club has left a senior citizen beaten to death and another golfer facing accusations of manslaughter. Yes. Now, what happened is, Robert Edward Moore, who is 76, has been arrested for a June 28th incident in the parking lot, which happened at the Glenview Country Club and left 87-year-old Dean William Zook dead. Moore Jr. mistakenly thought his car was struck by Zook when he and his wife pulled into the golf club for dinner at the restaurant. He's facing a charge of aggravated manslaughter of an elderly person. It's a crime punishable of up to 30 years in prison. Now, basically, he thought that he had hit his car. They get into an argument there in the parking lot. And of course, as they want to do, I'll fight you. Yeah, I'll fight you too. And then they started hitting each other. The suspect struck the 87-year-old victim in the jaw with a closed fist, pushing him backwards. When he hit the ground, suffered a head injury, died.
Oh.
Yeah. So again, killed the dude in a fight. And he's 76. So 76 and an 87-year-old fought, and the older guy's dead.
It sounds like Mr. Burns fighting, someone in The Simpsons.
It absolutely does.
Giving you the thrashing of a lifetime.
All right, we are almost close to end of time.
Oh, dang it.
I know. Spa offers bonus treatment or every man's best friend.
The word bonus sticks out to me.
Spa offering a bonus treatment. Yes, a spa in Northern California may be the source of a deadly Legionnaire's disease outbreak. Local health officials reported 3 cases of bacterial illness, including 2 deaths among recent customers. When they toured the facility, they noticed they have both a hot tub and a small pool that is not licensed or registered. And they tested the water, Legionnaire's bacteria inside. They're killing people.
Bam! Right there. And you just nailed it. We didn't get to the sponsor, but stick around. Hey, if you're 18 to 20 and you wanted to buy a gun, you're going to love you some federal court. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. Well, you've reached hour 2 of 4 right here on The George Show on 710 KNUS. I'll be with you until 10 o'clock. Charlie Kirk from 10 to 11, and then a guy named Dennis Prager, who you hear all the time from 11 to 1. He's actually going to be right here in the beautiful state of Colorado in the metro area. Better than that, at the View House in Centennial, just off of I-25 on this day. Write it down, August the 30th. And he's going to be there for our 3rd annual cigar night with DP. And you can go to 710knus.com. Not only text us from there, and we love it when you do that, but you can also get your tickets there. And that's the way to get kind of close-up, intimate contact with Dennis, as well as premium cigar. I think your first drink is free. There's a carving station. I'm probably leaving some stuff out. A lot of good fraternity. I don't know what else to describe it as. I went last year. I got to play a small role on the stage. And whatever I did it wrong, because now they want me to play a larger role on stage, which I imagine means introducing people. It's still yet to be seen whether or not Dennis will permit me to actually make physical contact with him or allow me to introduce him. I think both of those things may end up happening. But I'll be there. Pretty sure S. Tubbs will be there. Deborah Flora will be there. And that's great because that's your 3 to 7 o'clock block of entertainment and information right here on 710 KNUS. So go to 710knus.com, check out that Dennis Prager 3rd annual cigar night event. Now, you may know that our legislature and the Attorney General and the governor and the Secretary of State and they're all Dems for the most part, and they swing hard left. And there's no better evidence of that than the raft of gun control legislation that they rammed through the legislature. I think nary a Republican vote appeared on any of those, but they did it anyway. And they got super excited about the idea that they ripped away the Second Amendment rights of 18 to 20-year-olds in terms of being able to purchase firearms for purposes of self-defense. Well, as it turns out, there was an effort to go to court to stop that from happening through an injunction. And ultimately, after an injunction, there would be a follow-on case that would seek to have the law overturned as unconstitutional. Now, that law took the form of Senate Bill 169. It's actually 23-169 if you wanted to take a look at that. As you might imagine, too, not a single Republican sponsor. Here are the names of them so you can remember these constitutional-hating people. Senator Kyle Mullica, he's up north. Senator Jesse Danielson, Representative Monica Duran, and Representative Eliza Hemrick. Those are your 4 big-time sponsors, prime sponsors of this bill. And they all voted to pass it. It got signed into law. I saw a whole bunch of excited activity on social media from the Senate Dems, a bunch of representatives like, yay, we have just solved gun violence for kids, which is just utter garbage. So I had tweeted out at one point, how many violent crimes have been committed by 18 to 20-year-olds who lawfully acquired their firearm? My guess is it's de minimis. If it's more than one, I mean, it's got to be a teeny tiny number. We never got to hear about that before they passed their bill. But anyway, there's this lawsuit filed in federal district court. That's the United States District of Colorado. The case gets assigned to a couple different places, magistrate. I think originally it was randomly assigned to Judge Kane. Finally, it makes its way to Judge Phil Brimmer. Judge Brimmer is a Bush appointee judge that's a while ago. He's been on the bench for a long time. I think Phil may have been a prosecutor at some point in his career, but I just can't remember that far back. Now, initially, the plaintiffs included Tate Mosgrove, Adrian Pineda, and one of those smaller but really loud gun organizations that are out there that threaten to sue all the time and all that other stuff. Couple things to know about how this thing turned out. By the way, that's one side of it. They're represented on the plaintiff side. That's the defending the Second Amendment side by Barry Arrington out of Jefferson County. On the state side of things, because the lawsuit is captioned the way it is, and that is versus Jared Polis in his official capacity as governor, that means he's going to be represented by, wait for it, Phil Weiser, the Attorney General of the state of Colorado. So Phil's team shows up to defend this law and basically the governor from its enforcement. Now, I looked on social media, and Phil is a prolific tweeter and social media guy. I mean, this guy, and I think he does his own work for himself, for the Phil Weiser one, not the AG one. This guy tweets probably 50% of his day. The other 50%, he's either traveling to or spending time in the parts of the state he'll need to win over to become the governor. And I didn't see any tweets about this district court opinion that came out yesterday. Not a single one, not from the AG's office and not from Phil. Normally what you see are when there's good news, Phil will tweet out something like, we're never going to stop fighting for the ability of women to abort babies and all that other stuff. He says that quite a bit. Nothing on this particular piece of legislation. And that's because Judge Philip Brimmer blocked the enforcement of this law. He granted the preliminary injunction. And I want to talk to you about that. We'll get some feedback on it too. But there is now a prohibition on the state, and that includes DAs, enforcing this law, which would have made it a misdemeanor for 18 to 20-year-olds to acquire certain weapons, and it's bad for people to sell it to them and all this other stuff. But I want to talk you through how that happened. By the way, if you're keeping track, another high-profile blow to the Attorney General's office performance after getting crushed by the Supreme Court repeatedly this year, it's starting to become an issue of competence. I just don't know how else to describe it. I certainly don't blame the AG's office for defending this law. They're duty bound to do it. And I presume they threw as hard a punches as they possibly could. And my guess is they're going to appeal this decision up to the 10th Circuit, and they're going to fight like hell to make sure that 18 to 20-year-olds only get ballots and no bullets. That's my guess, is where they're going to go with this. Nonetheless, no real coverage about the fact, and you know this, had they won this injunction battle, Phil would have lit up the Twitter sphere or the X sphere with this, and the media likely would have paid a whole bunch of attention to his press conference saying, we're never going to stop fighting for the ability of the legislature to rip away constitutional rights in the name of public safety. We're just never going to stop doing that. We didn't hear anything. I don't remember any coverage seeking to get, and maybe I'm wrong. I didn't do a deep dive on what 9 News did here, but maybe they reached out to the Attorney General's office for a reaction to this loss. I just don't know. Nonetheless, here's how it works. There is a legal framework for Second Amendment claims, and a lot of this flows from prior cases. So last year, about a little more than a year ago, the Supreme Court of the United States had a decision in a case we're going to call Bruen, B-R-U-E-N. That comes on the heels of a case that Scalia penned some years before, 2011 maybe, called Heller. And actually, that's 2008. Man, that was dumb of me. In 2008, and another case in 2010 called McDonald. Each of these cases established the individual right to possess a firearm under the Second Amendment. And so here's some of the language from Bruen that Judge Brimmer had cited as his initial establishment of the legal framework for Second Amendment claims. This is it. When the Second Amendment's plain text covers an individual's conduct, the Constitution presumptively protects that conduct. The government thus then must justify its regulation by demonstrating that it is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. Okay, that's great. So it tells you the court needs to set out certain things before it grants an injunction in this area and ultimately may end up deciding against the law. And you should know when an injunction is granted, it is a sign from that judge that they think that the plaintiffs are likely to prevail on this claim of a constitutional infringement. And the reason they grant the injunction is like, I think the state or the government's going to lose here. I'm not going to let them infringe upon your rights until we get to the merits of the overall case. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't win. It doesn't mean the government still can't win and 18 to 20-year-olds lose. It just means that for right now, the court's like, I'm pretty convinced with what I'm seeing. You're not going to win, so I'm not going to let you enforce this law against people. So here's what it says. In order to determine whether the plain text of the Second Amendment covers a plaintiff's conduct, that's really step one here, a court must determine whether the plaintiff is, quote, part of the people who the Second Amendment protects. And if the firearms at issue are, quote, weapons in common use today for self-defense. That's the first prong they have to get through. After that, the court has to determine whether the plaintiff's proposed course of conduct is protected by the Second Amendment. And then, and only then, after they determine that, does the burden shift to the government, that's to Colorado and Phil's team, to demonstrate that the challenge regulation is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. Bruin has stated that the text of the Second Amendment must control over later history that contradicts the text. With those things laid out that way, and that is the letter of the law, you can see where this thing is going to go. So one of the first things the court does is it addresses the right of the people and whether or not 18 to 20-year-olds are part of the people. I know that sounds crazy, right? And they have to look back at the history as well. Whether or not they're the people, certainly they're the people that can be taxed. They're the people that can hold jobs and contract. They're the people that can vote. They're the people that can voluntarily join the military or hell, be drafted into the military. But what they can't do under the state of Colorado's proposed law here is to obtain and possess firearms with certain exceptions, like if you're on active duty with the military or police and stuff like that. So this is what the Judge Bremer says. The Second Amendment codifies a right of the people and goes on to say that 18 to 20-year-olds are considered part of the people. Now, you may be shocked to find out that the governor, and that's through his attorney, Phil Weiser, argued that the people, that term, quote, the people, does not include 18 to 20-year-olds for purposes of the Second Amendment. That's right. This is the party, by the way, that has advocated, although they haven't floated the legislation yet, you know it's coming, to lower the age of voting to 16. These are the people that want to register voters early in anticipation that they turn 18 after the primary, but during the general election. They passed a law that said, no, you should be able to get to vote. Of course, that law got blown up through subsequent legislation, or through a constitutional amendment we voted on. But nonetheless, this is the party that says the younger, the better, except when it comes to exercising an enumerated constitutional right. Then they say the 18 to 20-year-olds are not part of the people. Here's the language from Phil Weiser's response to the motion for the injunction. The record is clear that 18 to 20-year-olds were minors without full legal rights when the Second Amendment was adopted. And then it goes on to talk about how it's only recently that they have been granted certain rights, whether it's First Amendment rights in school and all of these other things. I just found it fascinating that the position that they take is 18 to 20-year-olds who make up a huge part of their voting efforts and turnout. Well, not so much turnout, but they'd like it to be that way, that they're now saying in court, you're not real people, not for the Second Amendment purposes. No, you're not allowed to do that. You can, of course, at age 13, decide to have your genitals lopped off to go into to be transgender, but you can't determine whether or not to obtain a firearm when you're 18 to 20 years old for purposes of self-defense. Interesting things that happen as the court continues to go through this analysis. It finds that not only are 18 to 20-year-olds part of, quote unquote, the people as necessary for the Second Amendment, but they also find that obtaining a firearm for self-defense is something that is normally protected. That's not weird behavior. They also found then when the burden sort of shifted to the state that there was historical support for this. There was no historical support for the opposite, which was to protect, or which was to prevent them from having this. Interestingly, in Phil Weiser's brief or his filing to his reply to this motion for an injunction, he says the plaintiffs should fail because they didn't tell us what kind of weapon they were going to buy. They didn't tell us from whom they were going to buy it, whether it was a private sale or through an FFL. They might have been able to obtain the firearm through familial or some other connections that way. They don't. That's the kind of arguments that they made to say that the plaintiffs didn't file something with specificity. Judge wasn't having any of it. Interesting to note that the super loud gun organization that filed the lawsuit and probably funded Tate Mosgrove and Adrian Pineda's involvement in it, they got knocked out on standing here. And that is that Judge Bremer said, you don't have standing, organization, under the Second Amendment here to bring this kind of a suit. in this kind of a matter, but he let the case move forward, at least for purposes of the injunction and other stuff, for Tate and Adrian. I'd love to get them on the radio, but I presume they're going to be limited like Lori Smith was to only talking with or through attorneys. That kind of an interview just is kind of lame. As you know, talking to attorneys tends to suck. Here's the issue at hand here. I think this means that once again, the Democrats have proven they have overreached. They've infringed upon constitutional rights. They've also, it seems like with this filing, not only is this another loss for Weiser and his team, but they have highlighted that they think little of 18 to 20-year-olds. And so I guess as we head into this first break here, the question I want to ask you is, what now? What do we do? Is this a decision with which you agree? I do. And now what? If the goal here is to try to, and this was the argument that Phil made, was that, hey, the state gets to have the legitimate goal of trying to reduce gun violence, that very broad, can't wrap your fingers around the term kind of term, gun violence for juveniles and that 18 to 20-year-old through accidental or intentional like shootings, suicides. And that makes up such a huge portion of the gun violence debate for the juveniles anyway. Where do we go now? What's the next step? If there's something that we're going to do to protect 18 to 20-year-olds from gun violence, what do we do? Is this something, by the way, do you want the state of Colorado to defend this law on appeal? It's going to appeal this. I think it may be obligated to do so, but the governor being the client, the governor can say, no, thanks. I get it. Just fight to the death right here on this case. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I think what they have to be worried about is this case, again, making it to the 10th Circuit, not only affirming Brimmer, but then creating a case where now they got to decide, do we go to the Supreme Court here? Is this the kind of case we want to go to the U.S. Supreme Court? Because it will give them another chance to put another nail in the coffin of gun control. 303-696-1971. Getting some texts that are in here. This is interesting. It's if there's anyone more misnamed than Phil Weiser, not sure who it is. Just a thought. That's funny. I get it. He ran, by the way. That's not just funny. That's not poking fun at his name. He ran on that. All of his campaign signs and reelection signs say stronger, fairer, wiser. So he's playing off of that too. So this isn't just some cheap shot. It's legitimate. Here's another text. How is the well-regulated militia regulated as the Constitution states? It's a great question. We can talk about that when we come back. Unfortunately, that's not what the case law says, that it is related entirely to just a well-regulated militia. That's where we get the individual right. But I'm anxious to hear from you. Is this a good decision? A bad decision? And what next? What are the steps we take to protect the 18 to 20-year-olds, if any? 303-696-1971. I want to cut away for a break, but not before I tell you in this 7 o'clock hour about our friends at Twin Aspen Dental. They are fantastic dentists. I think I told you Sunday I had the opportunity to have a great birthday dinner with a friend, Corey. He's a friend of the show, too, calls in. And he uses Twin Aspen Dental. He and his family, they've been using them forever, since before I did. He also thinks they're the best. Doctors Richter and Snyder, they make it so easy to get in there and get the cleanings, the treatment, the diagnosis stuff that they do. They do the whole panorama x-ray thing when you need it. They can do the dental implants, the bridges, the crowns, the fill in the blanks, whatever it is your mouth needs to be better, they're in a position to do it. And they also create an environment where it's just so stress-free, it's peaceful. And they have a program that says, listen, if you don't have insurance that'll cover this, we can come up with a plan completely reasonably priced that'll get you in the chair the 2 times a year that you need, provide you with the opportunity to get all the x-rays, the treatment, emergency services if you need them. And I hope you never do. I did once. My sister broke my tooth in my mouth. Long story. Check them out at twinaspendentalcenter.com, twinaspendentalcenter.com, or you can call them. And that's what I do. Set up your appointment today at 303-841-7466, 303-841-7466. You can also go to their place. Very easy to get to. Right down Parker Road. Kind of, we're on Parker Road up here. It's just a little bit of a drive down Parker Road to Stroh, right there by Lehman Academy. Great facility, super modern, super, super comfortable to get to. That's twinaspendentalcenter.com. When we come back, we'll get to your texts, your calls. It's George Brauchler on The George Show, 710 KNUS.
Imagine the lifelong impact of a journey to the Holy Land, surrounded by like-minded travelers. Picture yourself stepping foot in iconic locations right out of history. With nationally syndicated radio hosts Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher, you'll gain first-hand understanding of the spiritual and political importance of this vital region.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher here. I hope you'll join Dennis Prager and me on an amazing journey through Israel in October 2023.
Discover Israel's vibrant culture and why this nation is such a strategic partner for the United States. Join Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher on this life-enriching Israel tour, October 25th through November 3rd, 2023. For more information, call 855-565-5519 or visit standwithisraeltour.com.
Dr. Feelgood with you right here. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS, talking about the latest blow to the libs in the state of Colorado and their efforts to restrict the Second Amendment. You'll remember they passed a whole bunch of laws, 4 of them, that they were well, 3 of them, the 4th one kind of got abandoned. They were super excited about to limit the Second Amendment. This one that got struck down by Judge Phil Bremer, a Bush appointee, yesterday, and not struck down, an injunction against it. And that means that it's likely to be struck down as unconstitutional. Of course, it'll be appealed. Was the one that said if you're 18 to 20-year-old, we will only trust you to pay taxes, get jobs, and vote for Democrats, but you're not trusted to go get firearms. And the judge enjoined it, an enforcement of it, under the Second Amendment in the cases that we've had. Keep in mind, but for guys like Scalia, thank you, Ronald Reagan, and the recent Supreme Court justices that have been in place, thank you, Donald Trump, some of this past legislation would have maybe gone into effect and remained in effect, but for the fact that we had people that actually read and applied the Constitution from its intent at the time it was adopted, and the text and all that other stuff. So here we are. I found something online that says that these state policies, and this is at bu.edu, I presume that that's the Boston University School of Public Health, and it talks about a study that found that state policies as to who can own guns age-wise had an impact on suicides. So when a state allowed 18 to 20-year-olds to buy handguns, they had a suicide rate that was 18% higher than those states that said, nope, you got to be older than 21 to purchase a firearm, which is exactly what the state of Colorado tried to do here. Now, that is on average nationwide, 344 deaths. 344 deaths is what it is, I think, nationwide. Well, that's interesting to me. And again, I don't want to diminish the trauma and horror of any child choosing to take their own life by any means, let alone firearm. But it seems increasingly that we're going to limit our hatred, our liberal hatred for firearms in the Second Amendment is such that we will limit the rights of millions to get firearms for self-defense in the name of trying to protect a meaningful but relative handful year in and year out. That just can't be how the law works for us. The Dems in this area have continued to try to work their voodoo to make sure that the Second Amendment is so teeny tiny that it is near meaningless for people that want to possess firearms for whatever purpose they want, but at least under this case law here specifically for self-defense. Now, there is a bill in Congress that just got launched August the 4th, so Friday. Got launched on August the 4th. It's called H.R. 5135. And it is a bill, I will read you the title. And the reason I can only read you the title is they still haven't launched the text, but the title tells you everything. Official title is introduced to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to impose an additional 1,000% excise tax on the sale of large capacity ammunition feeding devices and semi-automatic assault weapons. I imagine they'll have to define that term, and for other purposes. Now, no text yet. I'm right here on the congress.gov website trying to figure it out. Now, this was launched by someone named Representative Don Beyer out of Virginia. I know it'll come as a shocker to you that he's a Democrat. And in fact, there are, I think, 25 total people, 24 co-sponsors. Every single one of them is a Democrat. Now, a ton of them are from California, but not all of them. You got a smattering here. Oregon, Virginia, Tennessee, Arizona, New York, Minnesota, Massachusetts, Michigan, Maryland, New Jersey. Not a single one from Colorado. None from Colorado. The state that's most represented, you might have guessed it, is California. Second most, Maryland, and then Illinois comes in third. But these are the efforts that the libs will try to take. And I guess the question that I'm asking is, one, what's going on here? Why is there such a frantic effort to try to prevent you and I, and we're not 18 to 20 is my guess, you and I from possessing even semi-automatic weapons? Why that? What's the frantic effort to do this? Now, I've been in the prosecution game and criminal justice for just a handful of years, about 28. And I can tell you the number of violent crimes that are committed, especially those related to robbery and murder, they're not crimes that were committed. In fact, I can't think of one that were committed with lawfully acquired firearms from 18 to 20-year-olds. Billy and I were talking off air, and I just a few mass shootings that I've covered. In Columbine, if you recall, they did not. Oh, God dang it. Someone's just correcting my grammar. You and me, not you and I. Okay. Anyway, yeah, thank you for that, by the way. I need to get better at those sort of things. In Columbine, you'll remember that the two mass shooters there didn't acquire a single firearm lawfully. Instead, they went to Robin Anderson. Robin went to a gun show, went to a non-FFL, a non-federally licensed firearms dealer, and purchased, I think, the long rifle for them. It could have been the carbine, and bought that for them. So they didn't obtain that legally, right? And by the way, one of them was 18. Eric Harris was 18 at the time that it happened. Klebold was 17. So then they acquire the handgun, the Tech DC-9 handgun, through Mark Manis and Phil Duran, both of whom were ultimately convicted and went to prison for doing that very thing right there. But that whole mass shooting, that didn't happen with lawfully acquired firearms. Sandy Hook, that guy stole the rifle, I think, from mom and then killed mom with it. I can think of not a mass shooting, but a school shooting. Arapahoe High School was a shotgun that the killer went and purchased lawfully after he turned 18 years old. And that weapon was used to shoot and kill innocent Claire Davis. There's one. STEM involved an 18-year-old. He's in prison now for life plus a jillion years. And a 16-year-old who couldn't have they didn't lawfully acquire their firearms. They broke into a safe. They broke into Dad's safe with a crowbar and an axe to steal them. The Aurora Theater shooter was 24 years old. He lawfully acquired every firearm he had, but he was well past the age that this bill would have touched. Now, there's probably other cases I'm not thinking about out there. I can't remember now if Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, if that was, I cannot remember if that guy lawfully acquired those. He might have. Uvalde, I think he did. Uvalde, I think that evil killer went and bought that rifle or rifles from a gun dealer, I think when he turned 18. I'll have to look at that. But what is this frantic effort to try to limit the rights of 18 to 20-year-olds? I mean, this feels like feel-good legislation. This is one of those things where it's like, we've done something great here, folks. We have taken away the ability of these 18 to 20-year-olds to lawfully acquire firearms and go out and commit crimes. That just doesn't happen other than anecdotally. And people going out and buying firearms legally and then using them on themselves, I'm certain that happens at 18 to 20. What they don't tell you is how many, especially in the state of Colorado. I covered this for you on the radio. I think I may have even written a piece about this as well. The number of deaths that are caused by 18 to 20-year-olds killing themselves with their own lawfully acquired firearms, and it's very difficult to do. I was able to get the information, I think, from Arapahoe County and Douglas County. And over the course of years, it was like 4 or 5. Now, I'm not saying those lives don't matter. Of course they matter. And if it's your kid, it's the end of your life. I get it. I feel like that would be the case for me too. But we can't just limit the constitutional rights of millions to save the proverbial few. And that's just not how it works. Why are we doing this? What is the frenetic effort here to limit the gun ownership? What's the reason for it? Billy and I were talking about offline too. what now? Like, what do you do now? Should we be trusting 18 to 20-year-olds to make these decisions? And I know folks say, hey, listen, but they're already able to join the military. I can't tell you an organization that is more tight on firearms than the Army. I mean, I've said this before. If a rifle goes missing, they will shut down the base. Nobody will get on or off the base till they figure out where that firearm went. That's legit. I have seen guys on the firing line make mistakes. They rod guys off the range. When I say rod guys off the range, you pull back your bolt and lock it in place. They will stick a rod down the barrel to make sure that it is clear. They have these discharge oil drums that you go to ditch because we don't trust everybody to make sure that they leave the firing line. If you left the firing line with a live round in your pocket and were found out, you're busted. You are busted. The discipline would be, that's how seriously. So it's not just that, hey, you're in the military, we trust you with firearms. No, in the military, we trust to train you with firearms, and we trust you to use them in a time of war or at a place and time of our choosing, but that is legitimately regulated. And then here's Jacqueline texting in. Jacqueline here, George, just say we the people. Yeah, look, that's what Phil Brimmer, the judge, said, that 18 to 20-year-olds are part of the people for purposes of the Second Amendment. Jared Polis and Phil Weiser argued that no, 18 to 20-year-olds are not the people for purposes of the Second Amendment. What should they be? Tell me your thoughts. 303-696-1971. Should they be? Should we consider 18 to 20-year-olds? There's got to be limits on what will let an 18 to 20-year-old do. What are they? Because right now it isn't the firearm stuff. It looks like the Second Amendment is going to protect their ability to possess firearms for purposes of self-defense. You agree with that? What other limitations? You know, we're doing these other things in the law when it comes to crime where when these juveniles, 18 to 20-year-olds, when these young adults get guns and go out and hurt and kill people, there's an effort now by the legislature to water down the consequences for their conduct because they say their brains are malformed. Now, their brains are perfectly formed for deciding things like gender and who should be governor and in the legislature. But when it comes to making decisions about firearm ownership or committing crimes, then they have to be treated like kids. That's just how the state of Colorado and most of the progressives out there in the country approach this thing. There's this duality. By the way, I think conservatives are far more consistent. Far more consistent. We trust you to have firearms when you're 18 to 20, but by God, you misuse them and commit a crime, we're going to punch you right in the freedom. We're going to take away your liberty if you do it. These folks are at the other end of the spectrum, man. We can trust you to vote. We can trust you to pay taxes to us and donate to our causes and our candidates, but we can't trust you to defend yourself with a firearm. That's crazy. You can pick up the phone and call 911, rancher, or out there on the plains. Someone texting in, gee, they can vote. Yep, that's true too. Hey, listen, got to cut away for a quick break. I keep rambling on about this. We'll continue to entertain your texts and your calls. If you disagree, man, give us a call, 303-696-1971. Do you think that 18 to 20-year-olds should be prohibited from purchasing firearms for self-defense? If so, why? Why does that make sense? Before we cut away, though, I want to tell you about a guy named DJC. Daniel J. Caplis, a stellar attorney, one of the great plaintiffs' attorneys out there. And he's been doing it his whole life. You know, some people start in one part of the law and then they go to another. I know a lot of plaintiffs' attorneys who used to be either criminal defense lawyers or prosecutors, or they started with insurance defense. Not Dan. Dan, from the very beginning, knew that he just wanted to help people. He didn't want to help insurance companies. He wasn't out there to defend criminals. He wasn't interested in doing the government side of fighting for victims. On the private side, on the civil side, Dan made a decision right away after he graduated from CU Law School, Go Buffs, that he wanted to get into the plaintiff's game. And that's what he's been doing nonstop at the highest levels for decades. When you ask who are the top trial attorneys in the state of Colorado, top one or two answers, Dan Caplis. I can't even think of who else the other person would be other than Dan Caplis. He and his partner, Babar Wahid, have been just knocking it out of the park for victims. So if you're a victim of someone else's negligence, their recklessness, maybe even their intentional conduct in some cases, doesn't matter who they are, right? Could be a big business, don't care, small business, trucking company, yikes, another driver. It doesn't matter. Dan is willing to take them on to make sure that you get the justice to which you are entitled. You got to give them a call, 303-770-5551. Such great people answering the phones and setting you up with Dan and Bob. 303-770-5551. Or you can check them out at dancaplislaw.com. That's Dan Caplis, Caplis law.com. Here's another text. 18-year-olds can't smoke. That's a great point. Are they the same thing? Should we not trust them to smoke, but trust them to possess firearms? What's the difference? George Brauchler on The George Show, 710 KNUS.
Why should you buy your next vehicle at Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram? We make car shopping easy. We have a huge inventory of new and pre-owned vehicles. We can even custom order. We make it easy. Easy financing, friendly staff. And when it comes to quality service, our expert technicians keep your vehicle in top shape. Visit us today off of Highway 25 and Plum Creek, or shop online at castlerockcdjr.com. Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. Car shopping made easy. Why should you buy?
George Brauchler back with you here, 710 KNUS. Another text that has come in here. If I can click the little mousy thing, I'm confused. So if they say it's for hunting, they can purchase one. But if they say for self-defense, they can't. Well, the law sought to prohibit it for a whole host of reasons. They were able to have firearms, I think, for hunting at the time. And there are some pretty tight regulations about that as well within that Senate Bill 169. But Phil Brimmer said, nope, it's not quite that at all. In fact, if you follow what the court has said in Heller in 08 and Bruin, it makes it pretty clear that you have a right to possess a firearm outside your home for purposes of self-defense. Now, that's not a limitless right. There are limits to it. But at the end of the day here, it seems like Colorado's attempt to do this is not going to make it. Now, Billy and I were talking off air, and, for Billy, it's an issue of he just straight up disagrees with the court's rulings recently, probably since Heller, because he has, and I've heard this a ton, and that is the idea that first phrase, that a well-regulated militia is the qualifier for the right of the people to possess firearms. And that's just not how the court has interpreted it. I've never seen the court say that your right to possess a firearm is tied only to your affiliation or association with a militia. And then the question I'd asked Billy right before we had to come back on air, because if we don't, then all you hear is the rest of the Cranberry song, was, well, how do we know who's going to be in the militia? Like, is that it? Like, you're not able to possess a firearm until you volunteer to be part of a militia? It seems to me that the framers of the Constitution, the founders, could have done something like that. They didn't, I think, and I don't want to speak for Billy, but Billy's point was they could have just said everybody gets to possess a gun, period, peace out. But they didn't say anything like that. They linked it to the well-regulated militia. I just think that the court cases have been pretty clear. I agree that Heller was a bit of a game changer on the personal right part of this. But, and listen, this is a text that comes in here. It's SCO buffs, Georgie, not go buffs. I disagree. I don't know where this thing happened that we went from go buffs to SCO buffs, but I'm not going to adopt it. All right. That's like going to a vape pen from a cigarette. No, thank you. I'll take my cancer stick the old school way. I've heard this now for a handful of years that it's SCO buffs. I don't know what SCO means. It's not go. It sounds dumb to me. I'm not going to do it. If you know what SCO means and why it's more important or better than go, please text it in and let me know. But I will never say SCO buffs sincerely. It's always go buffs. And it's been that way for me since I graduated back in, I don't even want to say the year because it's so old. Someone texted in, so you're telling me Billy's a communist? No, I'm not telling you that. The interwebs are telling you that. No, I'm kidding. Billy's no communist. Billy just has a different sense of what we need to do to address gun violence. And he said something, I thought it was clever. I don't know that it applies under the Second Amendment, but he said, listen, nobody's going to school getting drills on what to do when one of their classmates runs into class to vote. You know what I mean? Like, nobody is running in with a ballot and everyone's going, hit the ground, line up against the walls. There's some truth to that. I just think it's different than that. I don't know, Billy, you probably had something on that thing. And I don't want to throw you on if you don't want to take the ire of these people, but at the end of the day, man, it just feels like we've never limited this thing just to militias.
Well, thing for me is that we just have to read what the amendment says, and we have to do it in plain English. We had very intelligent founding fathers, and the founding fathers had the ability to use the English language, and they wrote a simple sentence. It has an independent and a dependent clause. And based on 5th grade English, the dependent clause puts constraints on the independent clause. That's it. I don't care about constitutional theory, anything else. We're talking about basic English. And the dependent clause inside of the Second Amendment puts restrictions on the right to own a gun. That is simply clear. Our founding fathers were smart enough to write the Second Amendment. In my opinion, it is the most elegantly and beautifully written amendment that we have. For you people thinking I'm a communist, I just think that what we've done is talking about we ignore basic English because of what we want and how we feel about it, rather than looking at what it actually says. Go back to English class, then get back to me.
There's Billy's getting himself worked up now, and I think we're going to have to put him in a seclusion room. Let's talk about how we're going to do that when we come back. It's George Brauchler of the George Show, 710 KNUS. George Brauchler back with you here halfway through the Tuesday show. It is 8/8/23. We've been talking here about this decision by a federal district court judge out of Colorado to smack down Phil Weiser and Jared Polis, as well as the Lib legislature, who passed Senate Bill 23-169 and signed it into law. Here's some of the language of that actual act. It is unlawful for a person who is less than 21 years of age to purchase a firearm. That section, by the way, shall not apply if the person's an active member of the United States Armed Forces while on duty and serving in conformance with the policy. That means we're only carving out an exception for something you couldn't touch them for anyway. If you're an active duty member of the armed forces, the feds aren't coming. I mean, the state isn't coming in and hooking you up anyway. That would never happen. Or if the person is a peace officer, as described in section blank, 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 while on duty and serving in conformance with the policies. The person is certified by the post board pursuant to section such and such and such and such. Otherwise, that's it. And then there's other things about the transfers. It's unlawful for a person who's less than 21 years of age to purchase a firearm. Shall not apply again, active member, all of these things. It's interesting, too, because when they passed this, they did not say it was a public safety measure. Do you know how they have that safety clause they can throw in that says it is effective immediately upon signing? They didn't do that here. It says the act is subject to petition. All of them should be. But lately, the Dems have thrown out this everything as a matter of public safety, and we need to, as soon as Governor Polis signs it. Well, that didn't happen here. And so that's interesting to me that they would claim, hey, we need to do this to reduce down the number of gun violence incidents that occur with 18 to 20-year-olds, but it's not a matter of public safety. This is subject to petition. And sure enough, it's also subject to an injunction. There's callers on the line. You can join them at 303-696-1971. Couple texts. Let me get this straight. So if you're 18, you can't buy guns, but you can walk into a hospital without your parents and have a sex change as early as 12 years old. Listen, I don't know how they rationalize those things. Here's one. This is the SCO Buffs person who I've now apparently got this little text fight with. There's no chance SCO makes any sense. Mark suggested off air that it was S as in let's plus go buffs, like SCO Buffs. But that's not what these freak shows are saying. They're saying SCO. And they said 50,000 drunk college kids say otherwise. I said they're drunk, young, and wrong. And the response is, and you're old, gray, somewhat sober, and clearly wrong. And I disagree. Here's one. I think the words militia and regulated should be understood or defined as the framers would have defined them. Surely they didn't mean the government should regulate militias. I think that's true, too. I don't think there's a lot of evidence that the militias existed on behalf of the government. They were the loose affiliation of neighbors. They're more defined by geography than anything else. Here's another text for our buddy Billy. Well, William, the left does not get to decide that for me. Going to the phone lines here. Tony from Littleton, you're on 710 KNUS. Tony, what do you think about all this?
Well, I was just trying to understand the logic. I think if I got it, because they can vote and they can go in the military and so forth, then they should be able to have a gun to defend themselves. If I picked your logic up, what about? Do you feel the same way then about alcohol and cigarettes? They can't buy either until they're 21.
I would be supportive of that. Yeah,
lowering the age to 18.
I would be, just out of consistency with the principle. But let's also acknowledge this: drinking alcohol and possessing tobacco are not a matter of constitutional right. Possessing a firearm is specifically in the Constitution. There's a big difference.
Didn't Scalia say we had that the government would have a right to? They can still regulate. I mean, it's a right, but they still can regulate. And so is a regulation saying that an 18-year-old can't have a gun? I mean, is that just too extreme? Is that what you're saying? It's too extreme. What about a 16-year-old?
It's not a question.
A 16-year-old can leave home. They can leave home. They can get married. They can be working
I don't know if they can get married at 16.
An apartment.
I don't know if that's true, Tony, that they can get married at 16.
All right, maybe not this state. I know various states. They vary a little bit. But my point is 16-year-olds are about as adult as an 18-year-old, and why not 16-year-olds?
Yeah, one is, my guess is there's just no historic tradition for that. And that was a big piece of this thing right here. But we really don't acknowledge them at age 16 as being able to make a whole lot of other decisions. We don't even trust them to vote. Right?
Right. They can't, that's kind of, isn't that kind of what our system is about? There's rights that you pick up as you continue getting a little older. I guess I once knew an 18-year-old that was drunk, and I would have hated if he had had a gun. I mean, that would have made me a little uncomfortable.
But if you ran into a 21-year-old who was drunk, them having a gun, you'd be like, that's totally cool.
No, I'm not saying that that's totally cool, but the judgment of an 18-year-old is, I mean, that question, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's a silver lining to this. Maybe there's a silver lining. Maybe now when 3 or 4 of these guys, want to go out and hurt somebody, they're going to quit throwing rocks at cars. Maybe does it change the dynamic of their violence?
Is that what you think had been happening before? Because as you recall, those guys, all of whom were 18 years old at the time, had the ability to buy firearms, and they chose rocks. Why do you think it would be different after this court case?
I'm not saying it's absolutely going to happen. I'm just saying I guess I'm not too alarmed at saying it. You have to be, when you go into the military, you know this better than I. These people get all kinds of aggressive training around handling a weapon.
Yep, that's
18-year-olds will be able to go out and buy unless you tell me otherwise. I guess they can buy any weapon that you can buy. If you can buy an AR-15, they can buy an AR-15. Is that the way the laws reads? They'll be able to buy any gun they want.
Yeah,
is that the way it is?
I presume that would be the case. Yeah.
Yeah. I find that unnecessarily risky. I don't know why. Maybe when they're 21, their judgment would, their judgment's not great.
Why is necessity part of the analysis?
I maybe on the idea of greater good. Now I know that sounds like communism to you, but I mean, at some point, greater good should mean something to all of us in our society. That, hey, for the greater good of society, maybe it's not a good idea to let teenagers who are really emotional, lots of questionable decisions that they make.
I mean, like whether to be a boy or a girl.
Now, you know what? I mean, let's leave that really emotional issue off the table, because there are doctors that say, hey, I don't even want to go down that path. I mean, this is about guns. I mean, I'm not sure 18-year-olds need to have AR-15s. That makes me a little nervous.
Why is it a question of need?
I say in the interest of greater good, I'm not sure that we have to let every kid, an 18-year-old, buy a gun, and you say need. I mean,
you said need. You said need, not me.
No, I did. I mean, I'm saying I don't think it's necessary. And you say, why necessary?
Yeah, why is necessary part of the analysis? Here's my concern with greater good, Tony, is once you adopt a greater good approach to regulation and the application of the law, including the Constitution, there's no end to the things you're willing to limit for individuals in the name of the greater good. So let me turn your first question on its head and ask you this. Would you agree that maybe 18, 19, and 20-year-olds are too emotional to make decisions about voting? They shouldn't be trusted with a ballot? We should increase the voting age to 21 like it used to be?
No, because they can't hurt somebody with their ballot.
Hold on. They can hurt a whole community by voting for someone that's just cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Well, I don't think they're going to all vote for Trump. So
it's very funny, Tony. That's very, very clever.
All right,
but nonetheless, your point is well made there, which is, hey, why do we trust them to make decisions with ballots, but we don't trust them to make decisions with guns? Why do we trust them with a car? My God, man, why do we trust them with a car? At 18, they can go out and buy one.
All right. That's the point. We let them drive at 16. Why not 16? Based on your logic,
we don't.
A 16-year-old should have.
And driving is a privilege, not a right. And you don't have a right to drive at 16. You got to have parental consent. Unless you're emancipated, you can't just show up and say, hey, I just want to drive a car. You got to have insurance. Still got to pass the test, all that else. But it's a privilege. It's not a right. I mean, I'm talking rights here, man. I mean, would you be interested in raising the voting age to 21? Frankly, in the name of the greater good, We'd have a lot less emotional kids voting, those young adolescents whose brains aren't formed yet until they're 24 or 53. The number you choose is appropriate here.
You know what's going to happen? I'm going to hang up and I'm going to end up thinking about an example.
Well, don't do it then.
address
Tell
that
me right
question.
now.
Answer the question, Tony.
I can't think of a reason why. Well, all right. So I guess the issue is voting is not putting people's lives at risk. If they've made other bad decisions they can't hurt somebody with their ballot. They can't hurt somebody with their vote.
I just think you're going to find a lot of people screaming at the radio. Of course they can. An individual ballot, no. But a group of 18 and 20-year-olds can make the difference in an election and put this guy in the White House and not that guy in the White House. Or governorship or the legislature. That could cause a lot more damage in a lot more areas than just one 18-year-old with a firearm. Now, if you're thinking in terms of, boy, 18 to 20-year-olds can go out there and just create a whole bunch of havoc with their lawfully owned firearms, man, I got to tell you, I can't find a single statistic that the side that promotes the limitation of these rights has put out that says this is how many gun crimes were caused by 18 to 20-year-olds who lawfully acquired their firearms. I can't find any stat for that. That's telling, right? Like we just don't know the answer.
All right. I think that's also a little deceptive.
Why is that deceptive?
Any gun that you have, you want.
Yeah.
I'm saying it. Whatever gun you want to go out and legally buy, we have to assume that bad guys are going to get that exact same gun. Because you are also against, and not you personally, the party is pretty much against any other types of restrictions that try to restrict who's getting guns. Anything that restricts somebody from getting a gun is, off the table for you for the most part. So we have to assume that bad guys are going to get guns.
Tony, okay? Do you think that convicted felons ought to be restricted from possessing firearms?
I can't say I've formed an opinion on that.
Why not?
I can't say I can't. I just haven't thought that much about it. I've known a lot of these young guys, a lot of these young kids, 18, 19 years old. They concern me. It's like they shouldn't have alcohol for the same reason. And they can't get alcohol. They get alcohol when they're 21, and their lives aren't ruined because they couldn't have legally. They do end up illegally getting alcohol, of course, but their lives aren't ruined because they can't legally buy alcohol till they're 21.
So is that the measure? Tipped over. Your life isn't ruined. If we just restricted your First Amendment rights in these ways, your life wouldn't be ruined. Yes, you wouldn't be able to exercise the full breadth of the First Amendment's protections, but that's okay for the greater good. I mean, where do you draw the line then?
I was asking you the same thing. Why not 16?
But because it has been pretty clearly established over a great deal of history that 16 has been treated differently than 18. We do it all the time. I mean, that's a big, big difference right there. We don't trust 16-year-olds to even vote, even with those ballots that you say can't hurt anybody. I mean, listen, I can tell you who's in favor of convicted felons having guns. That's the governor of the state of Colorado, the legislature, and Phil Weiser, because 2 different times they've changed the law to allow drug dealers, convicted car thieves, and a whole bunch of other convicted felons, tens of thousands of convicted felons, to have their firearms rights restored. Do you support that? Because that ain't a Republican thing, man.
Well, should they have their right to vote restored?
It's not. I'm not asking you about vote. And yes, I do think they should have their right to vote restored. Sure. But once they have been shown to have been capable of, willing, in their adult years to violate the most serious laws on our books. Those are the felony laws. We have historically said, hey, if you're a convicted felon, you don't get to have a firearm. My God, drug dealers, man. Drug dealers, under the change in the law championed by Phil Weiser and by Jared Polis and the libs in the legislature, they now can walk into a gun store and buy a gun, just like a law-abiding 18, 19, or 20-year-old. Who do you think poses a greater risk to you and me? The convicted drug dealer or the 18, 19, or 20-year-old?
I would think the convicted
Me
felon
too.
would be a greater risk.
Me too. And so when you say, hey, your party doesn't support any restrictions on gun ownership, I disagree. I think you're thinking of the guys in power. Unless you're a law-abiding 18, 19, or 20-year-old. Here we have adults who have proven their untrustworthiness when it comes to following our laws, and we've said, let's rearm them. And then there's a group of 18 to 20-year-olds who've done nothing wrong, who we've said, we just don't trust you because of your age. That's it.
Yeah, George, I appreciate this time.
Me too. I love the conversation. That's what we do here. I like it.
It's a tough. I'm concerned that over the last 30, 40 years, we've got to ask ourselves, just reasonably, how did this happen? How did this gun violence get to this level and almost with no end in sight? No end in sight. I heard a guy on Fox. He's a gun guy. And he was asked by the host, I can't remember the host, and said, well, where's this go? He said, well, eventually everyone is going to have to be prepared to kill anyone they don't know. The guy on Fox.
That's crazy talk,
no, his comment was, he was simply saying, everybody's going to have guns. You're not going to know who's the good guy or the bad guy. So every time you see somebody, if you don't know them, you better be prepared to kill them, because they may be armed and they may be ready to kill you. He was just playing it out to the end game. Everybody carries guns. Everybody carries guns. And
I don't think everybody carries guns, and I don't think it's outside the home. Billy was telling me in my ear to remind us about that African-American kid who went to go pick up his brother and went to the wrong house. You remember that? And the old dude with the gun came out and shot him, and then shot him again while he was on the ground. Now he's getting prosecuted for attempted murder. Remember that?
Yeah.
That was Missouri. I think it might have been Missouri or Kansas or something like that. Tony, I love the call because I think that you and I are having the conversations that we need to have on this topic. I mean, I struggle with this too. What do we do with this? But it feels like the only answer every single time from the folks on the other side of this conversation from me are less guns means a safer America or a less violent America. I'm just not convinced that's true. It's less firearm deaths, maybe, but I don't think it makes us a better, less violent people. It's blaming the gun for what's taking place instead of the people. What's ailing us is not what's in our hand. It's what's in our head and our heart,
And whatever, I agree with that. So if you have a gun, you'll use it. If you have a knife, you'll use it. If you have a club, you'll use it.
Maybe. I just don't know. I don't know if that's true. I just don't know. Tony, I love the call, man. I think that's
the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Tony's line is open. I love those conversations, and I'm willing to take a caller long if it's thoughtful like that. I love a guy who's willing to engage in the conversation. Not a single name called there, just rational debate between neighbors. You know what I mean? I like that. 303-696-1971. I wanted to just share this with you. I'd written a piece for the Denver Gazette back in March of 2023 when Senate Bill 23-169 was launched. And I had even then cited some things where I had said the law at best applies only to those 18 to 20-year-olds who engage in broadly defined, quote, gun violence, including suicides and homicides with legally acquired firearms. It'll have no impact on stolen weapons, ghost guns, or firearms obtained without the knowledge or consent of friends or family. So here's the stuff I'd found out. Suicide numbers will barely be impacted. In Colorado, suicide numbers cannot justify legislators' infringement of rights. Arapahoe and Douglas counties comprise nearly 1/5 of Colorado's population. Over the last half decade, that's 5 years from 2018 to 2022, Douglas has had 5 firearm-related suicides for 18 to 20-year-olds. Only one of those 5 appears to have been the product of a firearm owned by the suicide. In Arapahoe County, there were 8 such suicides, with only 3 attributable to firearms owned by those who took lives. So in 1/5 of the state of Colorado, over 5 years, there were less than 5 suicides by 18 to 20-year-olds with a firearm that was lawfully acquired. Think about that. And that doesn't even mean they bought it. It just means it was a lawfully acquired firearm. So we're going to carve back the rights of all 18 to 20-year-olds in order to stop that. And I don't want to look, there's a contingent out there that will say, if we can just stop if we can stop even one suicide, it's been worth it. My God, I can't imagine the horror of suicide. I don't ever want to know about it. I don't want to feel about it. I don't want anything like that to happen in my family. But come on, man, you set the bar that low. It feels almost like Tony's greater good. For the greater good, let's do this. All of a sudden you swap. There's no reason for a Bill of Rights if it's a greater good analysis. I mean, what do you do? 303-696-1971. Text coming into, I got an open line for you at 303-696-1971. Let me tell you about Gay Ribble and Empower Home. The reason I tell you about that is I've read now an increasing number of articles that say, listen, no matter what you think is going on in the real estate market, this may still be the best time for you to purchase if you're financially able to do it. Now, Gay probably knows 8 billion people who provide some type of financing to get into a new home. All you have to do to avail yourself of those recommendations, and because Gay wants to get you into that dream home, if at all possible, is to reach out to her and the Empower Home team. They've been doing this thing for decades, and they're there to help. They're not there to say, hey, you don't fit our specific demographic or socioeconomic model. Thanks, but no thanks. They want you. They want to put time and effort into helping to make you and your family happy. And that means selling your home for more than other realtors, selling it more quickly than other realtors, and putting you into that dream home despite the competition. And I don't know if you've picked up on this. We still don't have enough housing out there for all of the demand, even in this ridiculous market. It looks too more and more like the interest rates, they might stay flat for another segment here. Even though the Fed had given some indication that they might raise them throughout the rest of the year, the jobs numbers being what they are, the pay numbers being what they are, they may not. They may not. Now may be the perfect time to strike before those things get ratcheted up one more time. Easy to avail yourself of that kind of expertise. 833-301-SOLD, 833-301-SOLD, or you can check her out at gayhasthebuyers.com. That's gay, G-A-Y-E, hasthebuyers.com. When we come back, you, me, the text, it's George Brauchler on The George Show, 710 KNUS. George Brauchler back with you here, 710 KNUS. Billy and I continuing to have the conversation that we were having on air here. Lots going on there with the discussions we're having. Bottom line is I'm right. I don't Billy's laughing. Here's some texts that are coming in. Anyone under the age of 18 is considered a minor. Their parents are responsible for them. They have to sign for a driver's license. They have to sign for an apartment. They have to sign for them to buy a television, to get a credit card. Say again?
Yeah, but we could legally change that.
Maybe. To buy a television, to get a credit card, their parents have to sign. Their parents are legally and criminally and financially responsible for them. Criminally, no. I don't think they're criminally responsible for them just because they're under the age of 18. In fact, most of our child abuse statutes end at the age of 15. Someone else texted in, by the way, the age of consent for sex is 18. That's not true. The age of consent for sex is also down in that 15-year-old range right there. So, but this idea that we're criminally responsible at 17, we're not. What's also interesting, because I just did this, the son that's at home with me right now, who's going to go hang out with his buddies at, I can't remember the name of the place, but it's like a zip line place, right? They had an online waiver. I had to sign for them, and it was for any minor under the age of 18. That means my kid wouldn't even be allowed, at least by a private business, to use a zip line if dad didn't weigh in on their behalf. But at 18, dude can zip line all over the country, as far as I know. Here's another text. I have all of those things and thankfully have never used them, but I have them just in case, like insurance. Here's another text. And the emphasis is on responsibility. Where we gone wrong with that? I imagine it's where have we gone wrong with that? I do think there's something to that too. We have become such an excuse, blame-driven society. In part, it's why we're so damn litigious. But nobody can ever take responsibility for what they do or the decisions they make. Instead, we shift it all the way around. So, you know, with the left, and they're very consistent on this. If you are if they had their druthers, you would be eligible for juvenile style sentencing, even if you commit adult crimes up through age 24. They would tell you that in their heart of hearts. They've thought about doing that. They tried to do that. You know that right now, if you're up to 20 years old, you're eligible for what we used to call JCAP. The J used to be juvenile, but now it's like this young adult gets you out of prison early program, even if you commit some of the most violent crimes that are out there at 18, 19, or 20. Or you can still vote at 18, but we're just not going to hold you as responsible for your criminal conduct if you're at those ages. That's where we're going on the left. That's very, very interesting to me, but it's a way to shift away from responsibility. We sue people because we want to blame them for what happens to us. So you see these lawsuits all the time over every single thing, some of which are functions of natural selection. Do you know what I mean? Like, some of these people put themselves in precarious positions. This is why we have things on cans of paint that say, don't drink if you're pregnant. I'm making that up, but you know what I'm talking about. It's because people have engaged in pretty reckless behavior. And then we say, well, they can't be responsible for that. Nobody told them not to do that. So we do that. The system now is set up to punish the responsible and to forgive the irresponsible. And so maybe this is part of that, is we just don't think we can trust 18, 19, or 20-year-olds to do anything other than vote and pay taxes and rent houses and vote for us and stuff like that. We just can't trust them to use firearms. Here's another text. If the left is okay with allowing those under 18 with mutilating their body parts and be put on hormones with devastating side effects for the rest of their lives, then 18-year-olds should be able to purchase guns. Here's another thing that's going on out there. And this showed up in the STEM case. They were going to put on, I can't remember if they did, some dude named Lawrence, who's some expert in brain development. And this guy showed up in the reverse transfer hearing for the 16-year-old. And in part, it was I think this was this case. In a part, it was to say that there's a difference between the decisions juveniles make in these heat of the moment, snap reactions when they commit violent crimes and murder people, and voting. And this guy's been confronted with this. And his answer is, well, when you're voting, you're much more thoughtful. You're less likely to be emotional, and you'll have time to sit down and consider things. You're not being pressured. It's not a heat of the moment kind of thing. One, I think that's completely unprovable. And I also think it's false. If you don't think adults, in addition to juveniles, vote over emotion, I show you Exhibit 1, Dobbs. I mean, Republicans got slaughtered here last year, in part because of the Dobbs decision. And we're a state that has the least restrictive, the most permissive abortion rights of really any state in America, maybe even on the planet Earth. And yet it was still an emotional issue for folks to go in and vote that way. So I don't buy that, but that's sort of the argument that gets made there. Now, one of the things that Billy and I were talking about off air was Billy likened this to drunk driving. And I'm not going to do the argument justice, Billy, unless you're right, unless you're in the middle of your morning porn search. And it's snake porn, by the way, folks. It's not regular people porn. It's snake porn.
It's hatching season, so I'm watching.
Oh, the shedding is what gets me.
It is. Yeah.
Oh, did your skin just come off in my hand?
Yeah. The conversation that we were having off the air is the idea of, are we ever restricting a bunch of people's rights or ability to do something based on the poor behavior of another group? And while it is an inelegant and not necessarily a great analogy, I was asking about drunk driving laws. That if I get behind the wheel and I drive drunk and I'm doing just fine and I can go for decades, and as far as you know, driving drunk on the roads and never hurt or killed anybody, why should my ability to pilot that vehicle be limited based on the handful of dumbassery that other people are doing that does seriously injure and even kill people? And again, it is an inelegant analogy, but what I'm focusing on is the idea that an individual is engaging in a X behavior. And because other individuals also engaging in that X behavior do it poorly and end up killing and maiming people, we then restrict and prevent that behavior as a whole. Does that in some ways show some models or some questions about universal gun ownership? And I think it's an interesting question.
And my response had been, that's different. That's different than gun ownership, because statistically speaking,
you don't like drink driving, but you like gun ownership.
Well, I think they're different. Statistically, every single person that drives drunk poses an elevated risk of death to others. But statistically, gun ownership doesn't equate to that same kind of risk. Every gun owner doesn't pose a risk to the community. Every drunk driver does.
It doesn't at the same level, but there are statistics showing that gun ownership inside of a household does lead to more violent outcomes. That the houses that have gun ownership and the houses that don't, there is a difference statistically as far as negative consequences happening to someone inside that household. Now, does that mean
negative consequences? Yes. Or gun stuff?
Gun stuff.
Yeah, but that makes sense. If there's no gun in a house, no one can be shot by a gun in the house.
I know.
Get it.
Just the same thing as if we don't let anybody drive drunk, no drunk drivers, and nobody gets hurt. That and so the same thing. That's the idea. Is what I'm saying is that we restrict everybody's behavior based on the poor decisions of a few handful. And that is what we do with the drunk driving thing. So I'm just saying, yes, it is.
No, it's not, because
that is why.
Because the drunk driving is the abuse of that privilege to drive. Gun ownership isn't the abuse of anything. We also have laws that say you can't possess a firearm while you're drunk.
When you and I were growing up, it was allowed for our parents to have an open container of alcohol in a car. That is not allowed anymore. And what it was is because a smaller group of the population did bad stuff when they were behind the wheel and they drove drunk and they injured and killed somebody. So we changed the law universally to restrict someone's behavior. That's all I'm arguing. You're arguing the levels of it. I'm just saying that we have this behavior in our society, and we've done it before, saying because some of you people can't do this properly, we have restricted rights in certain areas to do it. We didn't say nobody can drive. We also didn't say nobody can
drive drunk, but you're saying nobody can possess a firearm sober or otherwise if you're 18, 19, or 20.
No, I never made that argument based on this rule. What I'm saying is that we do have this in our society where based on the bad behavior of a certain group, we have restricted universal behavior. That's all I'm saying.
It's not based on the bad behavior.
But I'm not arguing in favor or against this specific rule.
I get it.
I'm just saying that in general, we do that and have done it in the past. And we've changed the ability for individuals to drink while driving. Even having an open container is illegal inside of a car in Colorado. You can't even have an open container. You don't have to actually be legally drunk to get ticketed for it. You just have to have the open container. So that is it. I'm just saying those rules changed based on a smaller percentage of the population killing people.
That's based on abuse. It's like saying, hey, we have laws that say you can't possess a firearm while you're drunk.
And I would argue that someone that takes the gun and goes and shoots somebody is abusing the privilege.
That's right.
Yes.
That's correct.
Good. So we've come to the same conclusion. Thank you.
Yeah, but we don't limit all gun ownership because some buddies may go out there and use the gun poorly. We limit all drunk drivers' ability to drive drunk because they all pose a risk. It's like car ownership versus gun ownership. One's a privilege, one's a right, but we don't say you can't possess a car because you might drive drunk. We don't do that.
Let's circle back to the beginning of the conversation when I said this here, is that statistically, owning the firearm means that your family is more likely to be the victim of firearm violence. And that is
how much more likely?
I don't have the statistic in front of me, but what I'm saying is when you sit there and say that, oh, we don't let you drive drunk because you pose a risk, I'm saying the firearm ownership in and of itself poses a larger risk. That is statistically proven. I'm not about taking your gun, but what I'm saying is I'm just showing the argument on the table that we as a society have decided in certain cases where individuals' behavior causes harm, we have limited everybody's behavior. I'm not arguing in for or against this particular law that was enjoined.
Everybody's behavior to do what with drunk driving? To drive drunk?
Yes.
But it's like saying we have limited everybody's behavior to shoot their neighbor. I mean, yes, of course, because that would be an abuse of those rights. You have a right to possess alcohol at a certain age. You have the right to acquire a car. We don't let you drive drunk. But you don't have the right. Same thing.
You have the right to
acquire. That's a behavior, not a thing.
But you also have the right to acquire a car, but you don't have the right to drive a car. So we also put restrictions on that. And I understand
it's
why.
Yeah,
I understand that. But what I'm saying is we do restrict these type of abilities of a group. Now, I'm not saying that we need to limit everybody's ability to own a firearm. I'm only giving the example that because a small percentage of the group does some stuff that's not okay, we have decided to limit everybody's ability. That's it. That's all I'm saying.
Behavior. The other is a thing. You're saying we're going to limit everybody's ability to possess an item.
Firearm violence is a behavior.
No, but we already have laws that outlaw firearm violence. We already have laws, just like laws that outlaw drunk driving. I get it. 303-696-1971. Being in the ocean poses a higher risk of shark attack. Well, that's true. Walking in a thunderstorm raises the risk of lightning strikes. I think that's true too. Are there any statistics that show how many people's lives have been saved or crimes prevented due to a good guy with a guy? I think you mean gun. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are studies out there. I just don't have my fingers on any of them right now. Also, any statistics where injury or death was less due to a good guy with a gun. I'm sure there's studies out there that have taken a look at that. I just don't have access to them at the moment. Where does that stat come from? That's a couple people asking where the stat comes from about the increased gun thing. I don't know what the statistics are, but I got to believe that that's real, right? Like your chances of being injured by a firearm are greater if you live near a firearm. It just feels like that's common sense. Of course, that's true. But that goes back to the person who texted in, being in the ocean poses a higher risk of being bitten by a shark. That's probably true. You know, if you speak English slow enough and loud enough, anyone can understand. I'm not even sure what that means. How many lives have been saved by a gun in the household? I don't know the answer to that. And I imagine that there are numbers behind that. And I believe that anecdotally that's true. I don't think that's deniable. I think it's just the issue of, are there statistics that would show that there's some risk? I presume that there is some risk. Listen, we got to cut away for a break. When we come back, Mark and Joan, I promise we'll get to you. I have one line open at 303-696-1971. It's George Brauchler on The George Show. You're listening to 710 KNUS.
Imagine the lifelong impact of a journey to the Holy Land, surrounded by like-minded travelers. Picture yourself stepping foot in iconic locations right out of history. With nationally syndicated radio hosts Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher, you'll gain firsthand understanding of the spiritual and political importance of this vital region.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher here. I hope you'll join Dennis Prager and me on an amazing journey through Israel in October 2023.
Discover Israel's vibrant culture and why this nation is such a strategic partner for the United States. Join Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher on this life-enriching Israel tour, October 25th through November 3rd, 2023. For more information, call 855-565-5519 or visit standwithisraeltour.com.
George Brauchler back with you here, 710 KNUS. Got a phone line open at 303-696-1971. We're going to honor the callers. Mark from Littleton, you're on 710. What do you think?
With regard to the Second Amendment, I might offer an interpretation. the well-regulated militia is subordinate to the clause, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. In other words, you have to have a pool or a group of people that are keeping and bearing arms in order for the well-regulated militia to exist. So that's my interpretation. I'm not an English major, but I did have 4 years of comp lit, and I write scientific papers for a living. So that's my interpretation. Good luck, and it might be the reason why the courts have always sided with the people.
Well, hang on. You bring up a good point, because Billy found this case, and I remember this. It was United States versus Miller, and I remember it had to do with a sawed-off shotgun, but there was a National Firearms Act of 1934 that outlawed the transportation of a sawed-off double-barrel 12-gauge shotgun in interstate commerce. It was a federal law. Well, some people, as you can imagine, Miller being one of them, got busted and prosecuted, and it got appealed. And even though the district court and the Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the double-barrel shotgun owner, the Supreme Court, and this is interesting, unanimously answered the question, and the question was, does the Second Amendment protect an individual's right to keep and bear a sawed-off double-barrel shotgun? And at the time, and it was a 1939 opinion, the Supreme Court said that the Second Amendment does not guarantee an individual the right to keep and bear a sawed-off double-barrel shotgun, and here's why. It says because possessing a sawed-off double-barrel shotgun does not have a reasonable relationship to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia. The Second Amendment does not protect the possession. Isn't that interesting?
It is, and I guess that's my interpretation as a lay person. I certainly acquiesce to brighter minds.
Well, I don't know that they're brighter minds, but it was just interesting that here's this case that seemed to rely entirely on the militia part of this thing. I'm going to have to go back and reread Heller, because I imagine they had to confront this issue with Miller.
Good point. Again, I see it as a subordinated clause or a dependent clause from a language point of view.
Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate that, Mark. Thank you for that call. We got Joan on the line. Joan, if I take you right now, you're going to get hosed, because I'll have like 30 seconds with you, and that's not just fair. We'll come back at the top of the hour. I got a couple other things I want to chat with you about, but honestly, I'm happy to continue this conversation. More and more texts coming in. We'll read those as well. Let me just go through some of this stuff with Miller, and then Joan, you can try to chew on some of this too when we come back to answer this question. It says, with obvious purpose to assure the continuation and render possible the effectiveness of such forces, that's the militia, the declaration and guarantee of the Second Amendment were made. It must be interpreted and applied with that end in view. The militia, which the states were expected to maintain and train, is set in contrast with the troops, which they were forbidden to keep without the consent of Congress. Very, very interesting language here. I'm going to have to retake a look at Heller to get through that, because it's true. Back then, they had relied upon the militia part of the phrase more than the individual right part. Hey, you stick around. It's George Brauchler on The George Show, 710 KNUS. George Brauchler back with you here 710 KNUS. It's the final hour of the show before we turn it over to Chuck Kirk, then DP, that's Dennis Prager, and then Seb Gorka from 1 to 3, Deb Flora 3 to 4, and then 4 to 7. We go right back into the big chair with the big fella, Stephen Tubbs. I should tell you that Dennis Prager, as I've told you throughout the morning show, going to be here on August the 30th. That's the middle of the week, so it should be easy to get to. Going to do his 3rd annual cigar night right here in Centennial at the View House. Very easy to get to off to I-25. Go to 710knus.com to get the tickets. Awesome stuff there. You get your first free drink, a carving station, a whole bunch of meat products, which are great, a free premium cigar. Great opportunity to rub elbows with not just Dennis Prager, but the hosts of our various local shows here, including Deb, I think Stefan, and they have given me what appears to be, they're on the road to giving me an outsized role in terms of being on the stage. I don't know what I could have done worse last year to encourage that outcome, but my goodness, man, they just seem hell-bent on driving a stake through this thing. So be a witness to that and check it out at 710knus.com. Now, what we've been talking about it's really the Second Amendment, but in the context of 18 to 20-year-olds who the state legislature, and that's the Dems in the state legislature and our Democrat governor, tried to restrict 18 to 20-year-olds' abilities to possess firearms, to purchase firearms and take transfers of firearms because they, of course, can't be trusted to do anything other than vote and pay taxes. And Phil Brimmer, he is a U.S. District Court judge, a Bush appointee, ruled against the Attorney General's office, that's Phil Weiser and his team, when they sought to keep that law thriving. Instead, a local gun ownership group and then 2 individuals filed a lawsuit. The gun ownership group kind of got kicked out of the case on standing, at least for purposes of the injunction, and the other 2 individuals remained viable. Their rights were upheld and the injunction was put in place, and it started this conversation about the Second Amendment and gun ownership. We've had some great calls with Tony and Mark, and I wanted to take some more. We ended with a discussion of a 1939 unanimous Supreme Court case called United States versus Miller. And I'd been aware of that case, but I hadn't been aware of 2 things. 1, that it was unanimous, and 2, that it was about the militia. And they ended up saying that a federal law called the National Firearms Act was lawful. I think of 1936, was a lawful restriction on someone's ability to transport a double-barreled sawed-off shotgun across state lines because double-barreled sawed-off shotguns had no relation to a well-regulated militia. They were emphasizing the well-regulated militia part. Now, fast forward to Heller in 2008, some of the other cases, Bruin, and then you get to where we're at today. 303-696-1971. Joan, you're on 710. Joan, what do you think?
Well, I just wanted to comment on, and I'll make this short.
No, take
Billy,
as much time as you'd like to make your point, because I'm going to ask you questions.
All right. But anyway, Billy was saying on the drunk driving laws that they were not, the premise of those laws is not on other people's behavior. It is on the fact that you are impaired while you are driving. And so that's your personal setup, not what other people are doing. And so when he said, we've got that in place, that we do the drunk driving laws on other people's behavior, that's just not, people think they are not impaired, but that's why we have.
Well, Joan, here's where you and I agree. And again, these conversations continue after we get off the air. I mean, I don't know how else to describe this. This isn't like something we stage for the radio. These are legit conversations we're having. And then we invite you not only to observe and witness them, but to participate in them the way you are. So Billy and I talked about the same thing after we got off the air in the 8. And I said the same thing you did, Joan. I thought it was very insightful. And I said, listen, one is trying to regulate a thing and someone's possession of a thing. The other one, the drunk driving thing, is trying to regulate a behavior. And I agree with you. Yes. It's the behavior. Like, I think the example I use with Billy, and it may not be perfect, is I can own a car and I can own a bottle of whiskey and put both of them. I could put the whiskey right on top of the hood of the car, and nobody is at greater risk for anything. But when I combine those 2 things, that's when the law steps in to say, no, we don't think so. Whereas possessing a gun, the guns I have in my house right now, they're in a safe. They don't pose a risk to anyone.
Well, they don't affect your behavior. Owning a gun does not affect your behavior. Drinking or taking drugs,
Well, that's
even prescribed drugs, affect your behavior, and that's why they have the law, because they don't want someone whose behavior is affected.
And that's true. And it's far more
rather
about the substance you
Right.
consume, because we also have laws that, and we call them colloquially drunk with a gun, but it's called prohibited use of a weapon. I think it's 1812, maybe 108 under our state statutes that says if you're drunk and you have a gun, you're wrong. In fact, many times we have drunk driving cases that have an accompanying misdemeanor charge of prohibited use of a weapon, because that guy, and it almost in every case it's a guy, has a loaded firearm in their car at the same time.
Yeah.
And there's a law to prohibit that, because again, the risk isn't there unless you get liquored up, because of the point you made, Joan, which is it's a judgment thing. It's a behavior thing.
behavior. Exactly.
Can I ask
That's
you,
it.
what do you think about this 18 to 20-year-old thing? I mean, there's a legit issue that the legislature is trying to solve. The legit issue is we have an increased amount of gun violence with juveniles, including whether it's self-harm or hurting other people and use and stuff. What do we do about that?
Well, no, I'm not for increasing the age. That's not going to change anything on the gun possession. And also, now 18-year-olds become soldiers. So that doesn't, doesn't square. As far as behavior, it really comes down to something is wrong with the way we are raising our kids. I mean, take a look at it. I live up in the Greeley area. The amount of car theft, the amount of vandalism and thefts in general is huge. Absolutely, it's astronomical. And it is in the younger age group. So something is where, and I feel it's the lack of consequences. Kids do not see consequences.
That's a big one. And we've talked about it in different settings here, but I think we're seeing that chicken come home to roost. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think what we're seeing is decades now of changing the way we approach discipline. And by the way, this feeds nicely into a story Billy read in the 6 o'clock hour for the Thorpe Report, which is the use of these seclusion rooms out of Denver. Now we're investigating it, and there's all this great controversy. And gun control Billy, to his credit, said, hey, listen, your kids are monsters. And we need to have rooms like this to try to segregate them from the rest of the normal population, at least for a time, right? So they no longer pose a risk. And I'm like, you know what? We're now going to outlaw seclusion rooms. We're going to ban those things in the name of, hey, we're treating kids too harshly. There's such a stigma. There's this, that, and the other. And it's going to feed what you are saying, Joan, which is we are now decreasing consequences for misbehavior. Also, you need to take a look. I remember somebody said to me, they grew up in the 60s and guns were, rifles, lots of guys went to school with rifles in the back of their pickups, and they had rifle practice after school, so it wasn't a problem. How come back then you didn't have mass shootings with all these rifles in the high schools? So again, I think it's behavior. It just, I watch it in the schools. Some schools are terrific on consequences. And there are happier kids, and some kids. My guess is those are private schools. Billy had brought up a good point too earlier, which is, look, why do we suffer so many more acts of violence, seemingly acts of violence and homicides? I think statistically that's not necessarily true, even if you consider United Kingdom statistics and you account for how they classify things versus the way we do. I'm not sure we're very different. But I had said, hey, I don't think we're more violent than other cultures, but now I'm starting to wonder if maybe that's wrong. Do you think that whether it's the younger group, we are more violent?
Yeah, I do think we are more violent. I really do. And to go back to that, no, I have seen public schools that instituted a program, Boys Town, because the school was out of control. And they said, we've got to do something. So we did the Boys Town. They did the Boys Town program.
Yeah.
And 180-degree change in the school. 180. The students were happier. The teachers were definitely happier too.
Was this a public school, Joan?
Public school.
And the Boys Town model, that's where they use the Board of Education, if you know what I'm talking about. The hardwood board that my grandpa had at his house. And I'm like, what's that for? He said, that's for educating you. I'm like, oh, I get it.
No, they didn't have the Board of Education, but there were definite consequences. And it turned the school around 180. The school was so bad, nobody wanted to sub there into teachers they couldn't hold on to. Now it's a much better school, it was. Yeah.
I wonder if we're going to get there, because we've just now, I think, passed a law that eliminates the ability to use corporal punishment in schools as well. And by the way, Billy's question, while you said, hey, I think these kids in this younger generation are definitely more violent, Billy's question was, then why do we allow them to have access to firearms? I think that's an interesting question. I just don't know if it's, hey, as society changes, we just start whittling away the rights because we find a way to abuse them more. I hope there's a better answer than that. But
well, I mean, I think that's a good question he poses. But if you take away the guns from the younger people, is that going to decrease the violence? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it would. How about this? Billy thinks it'll make it harder, but it would also likely reduce their ability to inflict mass crime, I guess, on people, because outside of some bridges in England and stuff, you don't see a lot of mass stabbings. But I don't know that it changes much. I mean, look, the Aurora guy booby trapped his apartment with explosives, with 3 homemade bombs. He didn't need a firearm to try to blow up his apartment, So it's not that it'll eliminate it. And that's the thing that the gun control people say is, you're creating this false standard. Like, unless we can eliminate all mass shootings, then we don't need to do this. And I don't feel like I'm doing that. I'm saying, listen, if the goal of this is to eliminate these things, let's look at the tendency to be able to do that. And you can have an anecdotal number of cases where someone that fits in that 18 to 20-year-old age group did it, but that's not the majority of them that I'm aware of. In fact, Billy, you looked up the average age of a mass shooter, and I think you thought it was going to be a lot lower, like 12 or something.
Yeah,
but what was it?
I was surprised. I was thinking mid-20s, 24 to 28 is probably where it would be. It was 34. That surprised me. Yeah. I did not think that it was, that high. And again, I like the conversation, because that is the question I've got about the idea that we're dealing with mental health. And I find it difficult after a mass shooting when people come out and talk about, we have a mental health crisis in this country. We have a mental health crisis in the country. And so if I get on board and say, okay, we do have a mental health crisis in this country, then someone really, really needs to take the time to explain to me why we want to ensure these people going through mental health crises have access to firearms. Explain that one to me. If we really are having this mental health crisis, why is the one thing we want to make sure they can do is get access to a gun? I don't understand that. If that's really what we're dealing with, help me understand that.
I don't think we're making sure, though, Joan. I don't think we're making sure they have access to a gun. We're just not eliminating everyone else's ability to get it to prevent them.
Well, but the idea then is, do we want to test?
However, I still go back to, why didn't we have massive shootings when there were all these rifles and shotguns that were going to schools, in the high schools, when kids, because they went hunting?
I think that's a great question, Billy. What do you think about that? Why is that?
I think there are a series of different layers inside of that. One has to do with population size. The idea being, because we have more people, you're going to have more instances of violence, only because you have more marbles to pull out of the bag. If I'm pulling 10 marbles out of a bag, or I'm pulling 1,000 marbles out of the bag, my chance of getting one that is red instead of a blue one increases dramatically. Based on just
percentage
size.
would be there,
but again, it's that percentage.
I would agree on that. I would agree on that, but still, bring up the statistics of kids who got shot while in the 60s, while there were all these rifles in the high school.
And by the way, not just rifles in high schools, but it was a time of, it was pretty tumultuous, right? In America, we were talking about the Vietnam era stuff in the late 60s and early 70s. You would think if there was a reason to go trigger happy, that would be it. Here's Billy.
And the other reason, the other reason I wanted to lay in as to why the difference in the change is, I believe that we have fundamentally inside of America changed what I will refer to as gun culture. How we view firearms is vastly different when you and I grew up than what we see now. If you look at how we deal with guns, when we were growing up, guns were a tool for hunting and sportsmen. Now it is a tool for self-defense. And if you look at how they're marketed, you look at how they're portrayed in society, you look at why people talk about the fact that you need them. George brought up a guy earlier who was talking about the idea that eventually he thinks everybody's going to need to have a gun because we're going to have to defend ourselves from all the weird, violent people that are around us. That's how we're viewing guns now. is an extension of our self-defense. It was never, when we were growing up, about self-defense. Those
Really?
kids,
You don't think so?
no, not at all. When those kids were going to school and they had the guns in the back of the truck and they were carrying them sometimes on the school bus, they weren't going to school for self-defense training. They were going there for hunting and shooting training. It was about hunting.
Yeah, that's probably true.
But it wasn't about
But
self-defense.
self-defense has always been there.
Self-defense has always been there, but the focus has shifted.
But not
The
a
focus
major-
used
but
to
not
be
a major
hunting.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at how
I
guns were
agree.
look
So-
how guns were marketed 35, 40 years ago, even 25 years ago. It would be a picture of a father and a son hunting, either hunting deer, elk, birds, doesn't
People.
matter. Now the firearm manufacturers show it as if you need to defend your house and your family because the others are coming to get you. That's how we're portraying gun ownership now. And I think that's part of the reason why we use guns the way we're using them now.
Joan, last word.
Well, I agree with that point too. So let's take a look at it. Consequences. We have lost the sense of consequences, and we have morphed the meaning for guns. So if you kind of start working on those two levels, maybe there'd be a different change.
God, I think that's so true. I do think that this is the sickness here is not the guns or the guns ownership. It's the folks with their hands on them that shouldn't be. And I think that's a problem of society. And so instead, it feels like the left has said, we can't figure out, nor do we want to address why people are doing this. So we're just going to take away the implements they use to do it. And it feels like the right is saying, hey, we don't care yet how we figure out the other piece, but you're not going to limit our rights while we try to figure that out. That's very different. Hey, Joan, great phone call. Thanks for getting us started today, at least in this 9 o'clock hour. Going to cut away for a break. We're going to get Jay and everybody else at 303-696-1971. And Joan's line is open. Listen, I highlighted something here in this read sheet that I'm supposed to do for QC Kinetix, but it distracted me because they've spelled my name completely wrong. Now, that shouldn't be a big deal, but when you see it, and you're like, that's not how you spell Billy. There's not 3 L's and an IE at the end. So I'm not going to read off that sheet. I'm just going to tell you that our friends at QC Kinetix really have a business that is focused on one thing, and that is taking the pain away from you and doing it with the least amount of aftermath and consequences possible. And it's called regenerative medicine. They use the latest techniques. They have a great success record. They also make it easy for you to question the living hell out of them about why you should do it. So just don't take my word for it. Listen, I'll get you there. I'll get you the number at 303-900-8986. That dials the local medical professional. 303, that's the Colorado area code, 900-8986. You call them and question them. And question them. Go to their website. Go to qckinetics.com. Look it up. Check it out. And once you've got your palate wetted, give them the call, run them through and what you're going to find out is this may be the very best alternative to getting cut open and operated on and whatever else your doctor's recommending for that back pain, neck pain, shoulders, joints, knees. These folks do it with such less impact on your life and on your body. You got to give them a chance to show you how they can use you to cure you. That's qckinetics.com, 303-900-8986. When we come back, Jay and whoever else is on hold on lines 2 and 3 as we're figuring that out, I promise I'll get you on. It's George Brauchler on the George Show, 710 KNUS.
Why should you buy your next vehicle at Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram? We make car shopping easy. We have a huge inventory of new and pre-owned vehicles. We can even custom order. We make it easy. Easy financing, friendly staff. And when it comes to quality service, our expert technicians keep your vehicle in top shape. Visit us today off of Highway 25 and Plum Creek, or shop online at castlerockcdjr.com. Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. Car shopping made easy. Why should you buy?
Billy says we're still on the radio at 710 KNUS, and according to this texter, it says, OMG, Billy, wrong again. Just dem talking points. George, I think the caller has a real big point of consequences of bullying and the ability to fight someone in school that is being mean to you or others. There is nowhere to get out your anger towards a person, and it builds enough that it causes a mental snap.
Also interesting that the texters oftentimes tell me I'm wrong, but never actually tell me why. I get that a lot. A lot of name calling.
That's just at home.
A lot of things, yeah. But oddly enough, nobody laying it out. However, I do think our caller might be up to the task.
Yeah, I would prefer to hear the reasons why. But here's another text, and we'll get to the phone calls. It says right here, the U.S. has the third highest murder rate in the world if you remove Chicago, Detroit, Washington, D.C., St. Louis, Philadelphia. The U.S. is then 189th out of 193 countries in the world. All 5 cities have strict gun. Isn't that interesting? Interesting, but I've not verified. Our buddy Steve says that. Let's find out what Jay thinks. Jay, you're on 710. What are your thoughts, my man?
Oh, well, I love Billy. I disagree with him completely on this subject. I grew up in a household that had weapons but were never seen by my father, who went through the war, and weren't shown or displayed. And when I went to school, I carried a rifle because we had rifle practice.
Wow. Where did you carry it? Were you here in Colorado?
Southern California, up in the Sierra Nevadas.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, we're rural, had orange groves and all kinds of things. And then the weekends and after school, we took off on our dirt bikes and ride all the way to Las Vegas if we wanted to. But we always had 30-30s. Right now, I'm going to the top of a hill to work on a transmit site. I've got my Bowie knife, I've got a way to make fire, and I've got a firearm because I know I can live with all those 3 things. I don't even need water, right? But then let's go back to the other thing. The king that wanted to own this place was going to melt all the guns down and make cannons so they could shoot us with the cannons. And let's all go back to the fact that there would be nobody making it to the western United States, anywhere past the Mississippi, without a firearm. They would be dead.
Can I ask you, Jay? I get what you're saying. I agree with most of it. What's the answer, though, to the 18 to 20-year-old gun ownership thing? Should we be doing anything to address violence at that age group, or is it like that's not the issue? The issue is something else.
Faith, ethics, family, fun, sports in school, not sitting in front of a screen, learning how to get your you-know-what whipped and coming back and not doing anything about it. Decency.
You know what else? You've seen
so much, George.
You just brought up something I hadn't thought of either, but the whole consequences thing, we have diminished down the impact of failure and loss so much through blame and things like participation ribbons and all that stuff, where we have kept kids from growing up in an environment where it's like, you failed. Now, how do you deal with it? You know what I mean? Like, how do you deal with failure, to the point where now, as they're entering adulthood, these are people that feel failure, and whether it's act out against themselves or others. And maybe Billy's question then would be, well, then why the hell are we allowing them to get firearms?
Well, they don't know how to lose. I mean, I was strong side linebacker to the Cal, and I remember every guy that knocked me on the ground, and I figured out how to prevent it the next time. And I started boxing and doing all the, taekwondo and this and that as a kid. And my instructor, 5'8", Mr. Jewett, is the baddest dude I've ever met to this day. The baddest dude. He's going around at 82 years old right now.
Oh my!
And probably somebody's going to tap him on the shoulder and like, boom, he's on the ground. We have to learn to lose to win. That's what I think. And these kids running around, most are good. Don't get me wrong, but like what you did, and you're talking about the STEM situation. Yeah. I was at County Line in Broadway at that bank. And I saw 2 cruisers do something I've never seen before. I didn't know this shoot. I didn't know, of course, but there's 2 cruisers going 20 miles an hour down Broadway, side by side with the lights on, like they were going to a funeral, because they had already known that somebody was killed. They were 4 blocks away. And I found out later, I was in tears. I thought, my gosh, what the heck is going on in this world? But
you were at the bank at First Bank.
Yeah, First
right
Bank.
There.
Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't rob it, but I'm getting close.
It's good that you didn't rob that bank. I know that bank very, very well. I used to go there a lot.
One other thing, it's great people. One other thing too, I want to talk to Billy about is everybody's different. You got the people who are on the point. Folks are going to do like you do or Billy does, and so on. But, my brother, I told you, 10th SF, retired
yeah.
30 years. I'll talk to you about that. At 14 years old, he threw a rock and hit a car in the front yard. He hurt the guy in the car.
Oh, no.
Glass hit the guy.
Oh, man.
So he literally took the trash can that, trash is in front of your house. You got the trash can lid. Took the trash can lid and hid behind it. The dude in the car just like walked up over and looked down the ground and said, "What the heck are you doing?" Of course, he got in a heap of trouble. But, the next thing you know, he's commanding several thousand people in 3 wars, both Iraq wars and by the one in Sarajevo and, of course, in Europe.
Did he get prosecuted for that? I mean, what happened?
Oh, yeah, there was this thing called a belt. They used to have these things called belts that people used to wear before their pants were around their ankle.
Getting longer,
and
yeah.
I got to tell you, it's effective. I actually never had to do that because my father raised 4 before me. So all he had to do, or my mother, was just look at me.
Yeah,
it was just, you know what I'm saying?
And the others would tell the tales like, "Don't do it. Don't do it. Jay, don't cross him. It's going to happen. Let me show you something I've got on me." That's an interesting aspect of this too. We continue to target the implement and not the person whose hands on it. And we're talking about society's role in making that happen. I think, and this is coming from the prosecutor, I think we have gotten to the place where we push every act of misconduct by a kid into a court system that was never designed to handle it and doesn't do a great job. It keeps getting better, don't get me wrong. And there's a reason that we have courts for juveniles. But it feels like there's a lot of things that happen where I think to myself, good God, I did that. You know what I mean? Like, I can't imagine my parents having to go to court for it. And the thing you've just described, Jay, I could see someone having to go to court to address that with their kid.
Yeah, exactly. One other thing too about Billy, he said something yesterday, really set me back, made all of his sons look really like, he actually let his father go to Europe and drive his Mercedes around that he bought. Dude, that's like a dream trip. That is so cool. And I actually don't know that I ever met his father, but I remember when his father passed, and I just think, oh my God. And his father loved German cars. So that's like, he's got the one up on, you can't one up that one. That's the top.
Well, it's a cool thing, and it's a great thing for a son to do. But Billy won't tell you is Europe will not let him in. So it wasn't that big of a sacrifice because Billy's passport actually has a page that's written not valid in Europe. I don't know why that is. He still won't tell us what happened. Kidding. Of
Autobahn.
The Autobahn. It's the Autobahn. Exactly. Jay, man, thanks for the great conversation. Love to catch up more on your brother and his SF time as well. Listen, Jay's line is open at 303-696-1971. I do think, somehow we've gotten to another very important part of this conversation from this decision by Judge Phil Bremer, who's a U.S. District Court judge on this case. And that is, why in the hell is this happening? I don't think anybody's denying it. I saw some texts earlier, and I'm going to scramble to find them because we've had so many, but it was somebody who said they work for MAD and that more people die from drunk driving than from firearm deaths. And I'm looking this up. And so I found this thing from NHTSA that says every day about 37 people in the United States die in drunk driving crashes. That's one person every 39 minutes. In 2021, 13,384 people died in alcohol impaired driving traffic deaths. That's a 14% increase from just the year before. And then there was another article that I found that said that, where'd it go right here? Where it says suicides accounted for, this is 2017, suicides accounted for 6 in 10 U.S. gun deaths in 2017. I just don't know how we're going to try to prevent suicides just through the firearm thing. The suicide thing is a much bigger issue. It says this works out to a rate of 11.2 gun deaths per 100,000 people. In contrast, there were so many drunk driving deaths. That works out to 3.3 drunk driving deaths per 100,000 people. So while guns are responsible for more deaths overall, you are nearly 4 times as likely to be killed by a drunk driver as you are by a gun. That's very, very interesting. Some more of the texts that have come in. Chicago has some of the strictest gun laws in the country. How's that working out for them? And then they throw a punch at you, Billy. Billy, question mark. How's that working out for Chicago? I presume that just because Chicago and Illinois have strict gun laws, they still have borders with states that probably don't.
Are we aware of the gun store that has recently closed just over the border outside of Illinois that the law enforcement inside of Chicago and the rest of the state found provided the vast majority of the firearms that were used in the violence inside of the city?
No,
that's
I
the
hadn't
issue.
heard that.
Yeah. So there was a gun store that was just miles over the border in the next state, and it recently closed down. And part of it was because it was getting pressure because they were tracing back a significant portion of those firearms that are being used in Chicago
By
to
the
that
criminal
location.
element and stuff.
Yes. So that's part of it. That's where they're coming from. So how does that happen? Well, it's because Chicago isn't in a dome. It's not a closed system. I mean, come on, please. I mean, if we're going to do this, be better.
Yeah, I'd love to see that article too. You were good on that Miller, U.S. versus Miller thing too. Here's another text. We've lost communities. We have neighbors who have no idea who each other are and often don't speak the same language. There is far more competition for women than before, which often makes men more violent. Wait, what? That part, you had me at we've lost communities. But hold on, and they just sent in another text. I got to finish this though. There is far more competition for women than before. What are we talking about? Texter, I got to know what you mean by that. You mean because there are some women who are becoming men and they're also competing for the same women? Or are there less women overall because women are becoming men? Do you see what I'm saying? There are less women and more men competing for, this is a supply and demand thing. And it makes men more violent. I don't know. I do think the whole domestic violence thing is real. I mean, obviously that's real. And so those relations can lead to more violence. But men competing for women leading to more violence? I mean, that feels very cavemanish, right? Like dudes walking around dragging their clubs and stuff. I just don't know. It says social media has ruined our respect for each other. That's a great point. I believe that. And our neighbor, I believe that too. We have more problems in this country than a tool used for protection. We do. I think that Billy's response would be, why do we keep arming people if they have all these issues? 2021, more than 107,000 Americans died from drug overdoses, with 75% of those deaths involving opioids. The overall rise in overdose deaths is largely attributable to the proliferation in the drug supply of illicit fentanyl, a highly potent synthetic. This looks cut and pasted, man. I agree. Fentanyl's a big deal. A lot of deaths. Here's another one. It is mental health. We didn't have massive shooting because of more people means more crazy. It is mental health. We didn't have massive shootings back then because today we have more people, which means more crazy. Bex, when you send the text twice just like that, it makes me think, yes, mental health is the issue. I'm kidding. I know that you were trying to correct it through typing some of those things. Same problem with homelessness. That's an interesting thing too. We seem to be plagued by issues we thought we didn't have earlier. Here's more. 2021 more than, okay. William can make up being wrong all day if he agrees it's SCO buffs and not old man Georgie's version of go buffs. Help me out, William. Georgie is clearly wrong. Why Georgie? Why the dismissive form of my name? That patronizing sort of head patting name that I had when I was a teeny tiny toddler. Billy, I know you don't have a dog in the fight on the buffs thing, but what in the hell is SCO buffs so that we can stop this texter?
It has to do with an individual that is way too inebriated and can't actually articulate the proper
I get it.
syllables and the pronunciations that's supposed to come out of your mouth. So that's the issue. It's a SCO buffs. That's what it is.
Why instantly did you make him Sean Hayes?
I know. That's the reason. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Here's another one. You are spot on today. It is the action, not the gun. Kendrick and I went through defensive handgun training about a week before the shooting. Oh, I think I know who this is. I know lots of responsible 18-year-olds. We need more engaged parents who are teaching virtues and values to kids. I think that's true too. I do think there's something to the neighbor thing too. Like, it's easy to devalue people you don't know. And I just don't think we know our neighbors like we used to growing up. I got to put more effort into that. I feel like I know the neighbors, but it's tough. I believe one of the main contributing factors to the violence in our society is the increase of violent video games and violence glorified on television and music. We don't have that. We didn't have that back when I was growing up. We had Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best, Dick Van Dyke, those shows that didn't portray violence and glorified it. What's that? Billy
said. What about other countries that have those same movies and those same video games?
Other countries do have those same video games and those same movies. But whatever, I don't know. It's a great question. Whatever changes it's making in them, Again, I swear there's a study out there, and it was in a book that I read. It referenced this study saying that if you hold, in account all of the different factors for the UK versus here, the violent crime rate is about the same. It's not that we're more violent. We just have more gun crime because we have more guns. Here's another text. And the number one crime in England is knifings and stabbings because they don't have guns, so they use knives. Okay, that makes total sense to me. But I don't know how many mass knifings you have or mass stabbings. I can understand why some people would want to limit gun ownership to kids under the age of 18. I'm undecided about this issue. Thanks for a good and thoughtful discussion on the topic. Under 18, I'm good with that. I mean, unless you're with a parent and you're going hunting, and we've got friends who have twins, great kids, and they go hunting sometimes together with dad, sometimes individually. They've been going hunting with him since they were teeny tiny kids. I don't feel like they pose a risk to anyone. I would never want them to have a firearm without their dad around, at least till they're old enough under the law. But I don't have any concerns about what they do with their dad when it comes to the firearms. It says exactly. Well said, William. So that's it then, William. It's the drunk college student. Yeah, but it's still go buffs, even if it's butchered. I'm also going to cut away for our final break here. Before I do that, I want to tell you about Mitch Flory at the Art of Granite. Mitch, who you should know this little vacation that he took in the past here to head back to Romania. He grew up there, really Ceausescu communist controlled Romania. This is a guy who came over here with the American dream in his heart, and man, has he blown that thing up. He and his wife, two great boys. It's been a huge success story for him, but because the guy works so hard and he has the old school, not just work ethic, but I guess commitment to customer service. These are the things that drive great businesses. And there are a ton of countertop businesses out there. The guys that install and replace your kitchen and bathroom countertops, there's a ton of them. Nobody does it like Mitch. Nobody has the success that Mitch has. He'll take the wholesale prices he gets. He'll pass them on to you. Why? Because he cares about your happiness and satisfaction with his work product. Dude comes out, checks out your place. He's got teams that have been with him for years. That tells you a lot. An employer that can hang on to employees through that kind of work, that says a lot about the employer. They're partners and teammates, I think, more than it is just, hey, I'm hiring you to do this manual labor. They're craftsmen. That's what Mitch does. So whether it's marble or granite or quartz, the man-made stuff, Mitch Floria can make it happen for you. So you're going to want to give Mitch a call and ask him to come out. Now, first, you can go to theartofgranite.com. It's just 4 little words all strung together, theartofgranite.com. But you can give him a call at 303-386-5919. If you dial that number, and you should test it, test me, 303-386-5919. Call it and say, is this Mitch? Mitch has that phone. 303-386-5919. Mitch Floria with the Art of Granite. When we come back, your texts, any other calls that we have at 303-696-1971. It's George Brauchler on The George Show, 710 KNUS.
Imagine the lifelong impact of a journey to the Holy Land, surrounded by like-minded travelers. Picture yourself stepping foot in iconic locations right out of history. With nationally syndicated radio hosts Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher, you'll gain firsthand understanding of the spiritual and political importance of this vital region.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher here. I hope you'll join Dennis Prager and me on an amazing journey through Israel in October 2023.
Discover Israel's vibrant culture and why this nation is such a strategic partner for the United States. Join Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher on this life-enriching Israel tour, October 25th through November 3rd, 2023. For more information, call 855-565-5519 or visit standwithisraeltour.com.
George Brauchler back with you here, 710 KNUS. Final segment, only a few minutes left. Billy found some sound from another way to maybe address this gun control issue. It's with a voice you may recognize belonging to Chris Rock. You know, there's a bill right now. I talked about it at the top of, I think, the second or third hour, that some folks in Congress have put forward the idea that there should be a 1,000% excise tax on bullets and semi-automatic weapons and magazines and all that stuff. No text to the bill yet. Hey, I wanted to finish up with this in the couple minutes I have here. Just again, sort of the interesting, isn't it, hypocrisy of the moment. There's a NASCAR driver, a guy named Noah Gragson. It's his first year chasing the cup. He ended up liking a meme, and it was a meme of George Floyd's head surrounded by kind of this animated crabs, like from Little Mermaid. And you know, the song is Under the Sea, and the meme itself said under the knee, not, as some people have reported, under the knee. It's under the knee, and it was George Floyd's head on that. He liked that on some, I don't know if it's Twitter, Instagram, or whatever. Dude got suspended. NASCAR and his motor club, Legacy Motor Club, suspended him. Dude's career may be over. They suspended him indefinitely. I don't know, because it was so insensitive. And let's be clear. We ought not be making fun of homicide victims. And whatever you think of what led up to the police encounter with George Floyd, it's just inescapable that this dude was the victim of police brutality that led to a homicide. That's just real. That happened. We ought not be making fun of it. I don't know if you lose your career over it, but I understand that NASCAR has an image to maintain. But how about this one? Jamie Foxx recently posted a something to his, I don't know if it was Instagram or X or Twitter anymore, but he posted these words right here. They killed this dude named Jesus. What do you think they'll do to you? Hashtag fake friends, hashtag fake love. That seems pretty anti-Semitic, doesn't it? And then he came on and said, no, it wasn't meant as anti-Semitic. I was talking about a friend of mine and the betrayal of all this other stuff. He says, I want to apologize to the Jewish community and everyone who was offended by my post. Not offended by my post, not who I offended, but offended by my post. I now know my choice of words have caused offense, and I'm sorry. That was never my intent. Good God, man. But get this. Jennifer Aniston liked the post, and then said, nope, I never did it. Not even unintentionally. It wasn't an accident. It never happened. I don't support hating it. But where's the cancel culture for them? Where is, I get it that there's some riders on strike, but will they be treated the way the NASCAR driver was treated? Very, very interesting. More of that when we come back. Hey, listen, stick around. We're going to get Chuck Kirk, Dennis Prager, Seb Gorka, Deb at 3, Stefan at 4. I'll be back tomorrow, but not before Pete does the 6 to 8 part of the show. I'll be back 8 to 10, first day of school. It's George Brauchler, 710 KNUS.